All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Today is Thursday, March 2nd. We have 10 bills on the docket today. We're going to start off with Senate Bill 675. We'll then go to Senate Bill 748, 545, 679, 642, 857, 599, 564, 685, and then we'll wrap up the day with Senate Bill 742. So with that, we'll call up Chairman Gazzone's staff to present Senate Bill 675. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Betsy Hickson, here on behalf of Senator Gazzone to present Senate Bill 675, Howard County and St. Mary's County driver's licenses, driver skills examinations. This bill passed both this committee and the Senate unanimously in 2022. Senate Bill 675 will allow the state of Maryland to authorize a pilot program to permit third-party testing providers to conduct required new driver road skills tests in Howard and St. Mary's counties, so permit holders can obtain their Maryland driver's license without going to an MVA facility. The reason this is being proposed is for the convenience of Maryland residents. There are currently 9 counties in Maryland that do not have a full-service MVA location in which permit holders can take their skills tests to obtain their provisional license. For residents of these counties, they have to drive significant distances in order to take their road tests. For example, Howard County parents either need to drive their child to Glen Burnie or out to Westminster, Frederick, or beyond for their child to take their driving test. Third-party testing sites at certified driver education schools can also provide scheduling convenience by offering weekend, late afternoon, or holiday hours, allowing parents to schedule their child's driving tests not only closer to home, but also around their work schedule and around their child's school schedule. This program would not be unusual either. Maryland will be joining 7 other states already offering third-party driving tests. Third-party testing helps provide more testing capacity throughout the region, reducing backlogs and delays at our MVA facilities. Also, the Maryland MVA has already sanctioned third-party providers for other activities, including third-party handling of registration and title issues, and for licensing of motorcycle operators. For those worried about the quality of these tests, all Maryland driver education schools are already routinely inspected by quality assurance investigators as part of the MVA licensing process, and these quality assurance inspectors could also ensure that a driving school that offers third-party testing meets the same quality standards set forth by the MVA. This would not replace the MVA responsibility because the MVA would still provide driver licensing examinations at their facilities. Third-party testing is only meant to supplement these services for the convenience of our constituents. Thank you. We ask for a favorable report of Senate Bill 675 again this year.
Actually, we have several questions from members of the committee. If you could, we have several questions from members of the committee. For the yes, I was trying to joke with you because Senator Gazzone was gone. But she's like too smart. What is smart young lady? All right. give Senator Gazzone our best, please. Thank you very much for that. All right. All right, sir, come on up.
I didn't want to jump in front of anybody's batting order. My name is Chip Sheehan. I am here for Senate Bill 675, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf. I am a 36-year veteran with the United States Secret Service, and my subject matter expertise is in driver training. I have also, on my first day of retirement, showed up to Glen Burnie to rewrite the current teen driver program for them, pro bono. I really support this bill. It would be following up with what most states are now adopting. And I don't mean to contradict the previous testimony, but it is up to 25 states that are now adopting either a pilot program or a current program to do so. This is no different than the tag and title that is out in Maryland. We have 500 locations statewide. We see this as more of a partnership rather than a competition. And as was stated before, we are rigorously reviewed for our record keeping, as well as meeting our backgrounds with the students. Howard County is just one of the 9 that do not have any type of testing facilities. And that's one of the things that's constantly brought up, is the lack of convenience to take a child out of school or miss work to have the openings. It seems like the openings for testing are during the 9 to 5 hours. The after hours get snapped up rather quickly. I thank you for your time, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions after.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, first of all, thank you for the jobs you guys do down here in Annapolis. My name is John Meinl, and I'm also in favor of support of Senate Bill 675. As a parent, my wife and I have raised combined 7 kids. 6 of them have gone through the process. I've got 1 more still going, but I can say it's never been an easy process. So kids have had to miss school. I've had to miss work. In fact, for my last son, we just tried to get his skills test scheduled for this week, and the appointments were between 9 and 3. So it's either him missing school, me missing work. So again, what we're asking for is a pilot program. So Howard County does not have a location. 9 other counties combined in Maryland do not have a location. This is a chance to build a program the other states could emulate. So the MVA has already sanctioned third-party providers for tagging titles. Motorcyclists, as they take a motorcycle safety course, they don't have to test at the MVA anymore. They can show their certificate and get their motorcycle endorsement. So again, I grew up in Howard County. I went to school in Howard County. I worked for Howard County, and I couldn't take a kid to any place in Howard County for testing. When this bill did go to the House last year, the MVA did have one concern, and that was the advanced instructor is actually certified by the MVA. It's not the driving school. So I would ask you guys to consider one amendment to this bill, and that's on page 5, lines 1 to 3, and have it read that the driving school has an employee on staff who is authorized to teach the driver the instructor certification program. And that just means these guys have gone through the extra training, extra experience, somebody who can be there to supervise the program. So with that, I thank you all, and I hope you can support this bill.
Questions from the committee? Senator Sidnor.
Thank you. And this is a simple question. Yes, sir.
I need to stand up here.
Please.
Sure.
If I'm not, this bill passed out of here, what happened?
My understanding is it was help me here,
I think there were some concerns with the AFSCME union, MVA losing jobs through third-party providers, which has not happened.
Okay.
With the tag and title companies. Again, it's a pilot program in 2 counties.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions from the committee, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for being a good sport about that. All right. So with that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 675. We'll now go on to Senate Bill 679.
No.
Sorry, I'm sorry. My apologies. 748. All right, scratch that. So now we're going to go to Senate Bill 545, Senator Muse.
No, it wouldn't matter, but I appreciate it very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the greatest committee here in the Senate, JPR. And I want to call up for a moment former delegate Michael Arrington, who is now the CEO of Capital Connections LLC, to join me on the panel. He is here, and I would like to recognize a few of the tow truck drivers who have been working on this legislation for 12 to 18 months. If you all would just stand, and welcome to the Senate, and thank you very much for coming. This will probably be the easiest bill you will deal with in JPR, and I mean that literally. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. They thought they were in church. They were waiting for me to do like that. My bad. SB 545 would change the hours in which a towed vehicle may be reclaimed, which currently is 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. It will change those hours to a minimum of 6 a.m. to 12 midnight, 7 days a week, thus only taking 6 hours a day away for one to reclaim their car. Currently, contractors who tow on behalf of, for example, the Maryland State Police are only required to make vehicles available to be reclaimed Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday to Sunday from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Those are the hours for using as an example the Maryland State Police. And this legislation is not actually asking for the reduction of hours to meet those of the Maryland State Police, but we're searching for a reasonable request of 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 12 midnight. Thus, SB 45 allows private property tow operators to operate under the same reasonable and safe hours that others are allowed to operate. There is a letter of concern that we have, and I think that we can deal with that. As far as I know, there's no opposition, but there's a letter of concern, and I'll handle it this way. Not all private tow truck companies will take advantage of this. It does not say you must only operate within these hours. It says for those who choose to do so, maybe because you have a small company with somebody with 2 trucks and they run it themselves, and they're being on call 24/7 can take its toll on family, can take its toll all the way around. But if they have the flexibility to do this, although I think most companies are like those of us who are business persons, we want to make as much money as we can, so they're not going to be just out there trying to not work at all. And so it does provide them just with the opportunity to do that. The only concern was about an amendment that we can talk about that affects municipalities. That would say if their rules are more stringent than the county or in which they're located, or like Baltimore City, that we can work it out so that it's flexible so that they can carry it out. The purpose of this bill is to give them that flexibility to not be on mandatory call 24/7, and it is to make sure that that they have that ability to do that. So that's really all that this bill will do. Michael Arrington, as you know, is a former delegate here in Annapolis, and he'll come now and further explain. And then at that point, Mr. Chairman, if there are questions, we'll take it. Thank you, colleagues, and I look forward for a favorable report on this with Snickers bars. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Arrington. My company's Capital Connections located at 191 Main Street here in Annapolis. I'm here today on behalf of the Prince George's County Towing Association, and thank you, Senator Muse, for being the sponsor of our bill this year. This piece of legislation has passed the House of Delegates 2 years in a row, going back 2 years ago, 131-7, and didn't get anywhere here in the Judicial Proceedings Committee. So we figured we start here this year. But I want to make 2 quick points. The first point I want to make is that nobody has to get towed. Nobody has to get towed. Everybody, all these people who are coming through the building today, there's no parking here in Annapolis. They choose where they're going to park. Every private property by law has signs that say no parking allowed unless you're permitted. When you choose to park there on your own, you stand the risk of being towed. Nobody has to get towed, right? Don't lose sight of that. Everybody who came down here made a choice to park either legally or illegally. Private property owners are people who live in places like Mr. Chairman, the big senior facility in Montgomery County, Leisure World. People who live in Leisure World deserve to be able to come home and park in spaces where they live. And Leisure World states if you're parked illegally, you're going to get towed. So that's a major issue. I don't want you to lose sight of. Nobody ever has to get towed. The second issue I'd like to make is if you tow your car, if you leave your car parked out here on Road Boulevard or in front of the State House or the governor's mansion, guess what? When you come back, it's not going to be there. It's going to be towed. And you know when you can pick it up? If it's at 5 o'clock this afternoon, you can pick it up at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Every law enforcement entity around the state, every municipality contracts with towing for tow enforcement. And everybody who gets towed by law enforcement in those municipalities, they only can pick up their car in between the hours of 9 to 6. Why should private tow operators, the last point I'll make, private tow operators have to be open 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? Now, the third issue I'd make is we've had 2 tow operators, drivers lose their life because in between the hours of 12 and 6, there's a different element that's coming to reclaim their cars. And law enforcement will document that. It is documented. The assaults, the threats, the damage to property, insurance companies can document that for you. So this is a common sense piece of legislation that allows people to have reasonable hours to make cars available to be reclaimed without having their lives at risk. And finally, I'll just make the point again. Nobody has to get towed, right? The AG's office, and I have a great deal of respect for the Attorney General's office. They say, well, you know, we want to protect consumers. Consumers need to make the correct decision and not break the law, not violate the regulations that relates to parking. So with that having been said, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully ask a favorable report.
Appreciate that.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I've been towed once, and it was at an event where a former delegate from Prince George's County was running for former county executive from Prince George's County running for governor, and they towed my car. But you know who drove me up to get it? He did. He drove me up to get it. No. The county exec former Sherman Baker.
All right. Okay.
He's like nicest guy in the world. Drove me up to get it. No, but I didn't realize this. One thing, I've got the letter from the Attorney General that spoke to section 21-10A of the transportation article. And I know that I don't think I even realized this last year, but it still leaves the ultimate decision to the local jurisdiction. So we can pass this, then you can have this discussion at the counny level. But the way it's drafted, so
we'd be happy to have that discussion.
So I owe Prince George's County, and you've got the right sponsor this year. So we're cooking with gas. All right, or not gas. All right, electric. No, he didn't pay for it. All right, so let's go, Senator McKay and then Senator Folden.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing this very good bill. For full disclosure, I used to own a towing company, and I've had to deal with a lot of these different issues. And I think this is a really good bill. I think it's a fair bill. And don't choices have consequences?
Absolutely. Yes, they do. They do.
Unless you've got the county executive to bail you out.
Right.
All right, Senator Folden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for bringing the bill forward. I appreciate you talking, bringing this measure forward. I have a few questions, concerns. You can stand up or you can share. Y'all can.
Sure.
Do we have any data on the numbers of vehicles that have been towed between midnight and 6 a.m. in the past couple years or by year or anything like that? Do you have any of that data to share?
I don't have it handy, but I'm sure the industry that they're here today, they hear the question, they can get it to you.
So my question is that, so there's more towing at nighttime.
And more towing.
Generally speaking, that's where this leads me to my next question is, so in Frederick County, we had an issue with predatory tow companies.
Mhm.
And they were going around and they go at nighttime.
Right.
They ride around in these all blacked out or dark trucks. They're not even marked. They just have a DOT number on them and that's it. And they hook these vehicles up. So my question is that, does this mean unless you're summoned by law enforcement for a traffic collision or a DUI arrest or something like that, that you're not going to partake in these type of Are they also not going to be towing? Because you're talking about being home with their families, not being on call,
Right.
but does this mean they're not going to be out towing people's cars in these private
12 to
communities?
6. No, because what happens is a property, let's say a condominium association, okay?
They contract with you,
They contract
Yeah.
with my clients,
right?
and they want to make sure that the residents of that property
Sure.
have parking. And so and by law, it states that you have to have in a conspicuous manner signage that says there's no parking allowed unless you have a permit, right? And if you are told, here's a number you need to call. So,
But they
The
can't
short-
call it by this bill. It wouldn't matter if they called it because you guys would be closed and wouldn't have to come out.
well, no, you'd have to, the sign would have to be changed to state the hours in which you can reclaim your car.
Okay, so I guess that's part one of that question. And the other part is if I'm reading this correctly, once the time, say you're still allowed to go in this partnership with these communities and you hook that vehicle, once you hook that vehicle, you're in possession of that vehicle, correct?
Correct?
At that time, by what I'm reading here is if the person comes out and is like, hey, don't tow my car. I don't want you to tow it. By this, you could just say, too bad, see you at 6 a.m. and not only have to pay a tow bill, but you have to pay a storage fee.
That's what normally happens anyway. If
Oh, it
if
doesn't
an
happen,
officer's
that.
giving me a ticket and I'm parking and I run out and say, please don't write my ticket, they're gonna write the ticket anyway.
So officers aren't,
Right.
no. Officers aren't, I'm talking about in these condominium associations. I'm not talking about an officer
Gotcha.
towing a car. I'm talking
Okay.
about in these communities where people have this agreement with a tow company to come in and tow their vehicles.
Sure.
There are times,
I know exactly what you're saying.
okay,
So here's the answer to your question. These same operators tow for the state police, Prince George's County Police, and Arundel County Police.
not
Now-
all of them.
No.
Not all of them.
Most law enforcement in Prince George's County, we have the towing, when there's an accident on the road.
You
There are
have to be
20,
put on a list,
there are 25 people on that list. They're private companies.
correct?
They aren't state employees or county employees. Now, the answer to your question is, when that officer summons them to hook up a car.
I'm not talking about an officer. I'm not talking about a police
but-
request.
But they have the same practices.
No, the responsibility of the officer becomes for a matter of public safety. They tow the vehicle so that the person no longer has access to that vehicle, or it's a matter of a crime that it's now being impounded. There's a difference. What I'm talking about is you have a civil issue between a property management community and a tow company that engage in a contract. They go into these areas and they tow said vehicle because it doesn't have the proper markings on the vehicle.
Correct.
Once they hook up that vehicle by this law, they're not required at all to drop that vehicle. And if the person comes out running, even if the police
I got
show up at that point, because people will block in a tow truck because they're like, you're not leaving, that's my car. Police get summons there, it's a civil issue.
So what do you?
So my question is
Gotcha.
that at that point, there's no remedy for them to get their car till 6 a.m. And then they not only have to pay a tow fee, they have to pay the mileage fee and they have to pay the impound storage fee for that day because it's done by calendar day regardless.
Well, that's a very good question. And thank you for asking. In Prince George's County, for example, if that were to happen, we have it in our law that they can charge a $50 drop fee. So if they're there and you
But
come out, they charge,
they
say,
can.
leave my car. Well.
But it's not required.
They could drop it. It's by
not
law. It's by law.
Oh, it's in Prince George's County's law that they have to drop it if they do.
Drop it and they pay
Okay.
$50 and you fill out the.
That's
paperwork
better,
and
but
that's
I
it.
don't see anything to that effect, like, so that's the part, I guess, going back to the chairman's where it's
We can
left
work
up
out
to
a
judicial
number.
jurisdiction. Okay,
But the question is, why is he hooking up the car in the first place?
because
That's the ultimate
because it's a civil agreement between a tow company and a property management company.
It's because the person whose vehicle is being impounded is parked illegally. That's the
Through-
reason why.
through a
That's
Through a
the,
civil, it's a civil agreement between the property management company and the tow company. It has nothing to do with law enforcement.
no, I
There's
understand.
no citable offense. It's private property. Cops can't come out there and do that. So understand there's a difference.
No, I got that, and what we'll do, I'd like to work with you
Yeah.
and Mr. Chairman, anybody else that you want, or any amendments that you think would make this doable.
Thank you.
Still look forward to a favorable.
A lot of those concerns could be addressed at the
Makes sense.
municipal level, or not the county level rather, but
Thank you very much.
excellent. Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hold on, we have Senator James and then Senator Kelly.
Hi, I don't usually have a personal experience that's relatable in this committee, but I actually do. And I want you to think about this for a minute. I was about 24 or 5 years old. I was truly a country mouse. Okay, very naive. And I drove to Baltimore City, like for the first time, to go to a nightclub. And I went into a neighborhood that I wasn't familiar with. And you're right, parking was difficult. And I found an opening at a gas station that was closed. And I literally, because I misread the sign. I have a little dyslexia, but it doesn't even matter. I misread the sign. So I go on my merry way to this club with my young girlfriend, and we come back out at around 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and my car is gone. Now I burst into tears. I am a stranger in Baltimore City. I know nothing. I don't have money. This is before cell phones. This is before debit cards. I know that's changed things a little bit, but for the grace that I ran back to the bar and begged them to let me in for a second, because I was scared to death. And I said, I got to try to call somebody to come help me. And so somebody did come. I didn't want to call my parents because I just thought they'd be so angry at me. It almost puts me in tears because this is a really horrible experience for me. So finally, a couple of young men I knew came and then we drove and finally found the car. And what I'm telling you is that that's a public safety issue. And I'm not the only one. You said something sort of rhetorically, nobody needs to get towed. I tried, I made a mistake. But I'll tell you, after midnight or even after 11 a.m. and you're a young woman, I can't speak to anybody else. I'm just going to talk about young women or women in general. I don't want to get caught in a city where I can't get my car. I might not have money. My cell phone might have died. And I feel that that is a very unsafe. I get your safety issue, but I think that's a horribly unsafe position that this bill could put us in unless we come up with some other solution. So I just want you to think about that a little bit.
Thank you. And we will, I know in Prince George's County that couldn't happen because of the number of contractors that the police department contract with, who's around the clock. There are 25 of them who are contractors, who even though they're not employees of the police department will only tow from 18 hours a day. There are 25 of them who are on standby. There is a way still to retrieve your car. This bill is simply saying to the small businesses that want to have a business and they have families, they don't want to be on call 24 hours a day, only for those who choose to. Most would choose maybe the money over that, but that they don't have to do it during those 6 hours only when this is in effect. This is only in effect for 6 hours, and I understand very well. And if you have anything that you can share with me that would help.
I want to help people, but I got to tell you, we cannot leave people like in my circumstance, which I think that still happens a lot. We also cannot engage.
I'm open to anything that you can think of to help me to come up.
All right, I'll help you. I will, if I can.
Actually, Senator James kind of said exactly where I was thinking about this as well, because I've also been, she's not alone. I have been in that situation as well. And I think of my daughter, who I hope will never be in that situation, but maybe. So I would like to find a way that we can ensure that you don't have anybody who's in a situation where they feel unsafe as a result of this. So I understand you saying sort of the rules that Prince George's has in place, but I believe this is a statewide bill, right? And each local jurisdiction is going to come up with their own. Right, they can, but we're not requiring them to, and there's no guarantee that we don't accidentally make things worse for people, maybe not in Prince George's County by doing it this way. So I'd love to work with you on figuring out how to do it right, share the concerns about everyone's safety.
You're very thoughtful, and we will do just that because we don't want anyone as well being in jeopardy and harm's way at all.
Just one, Senator James, was that where you got your car towed? Were you parked on the street?
No. Actually, well, listen, I said I was 25. Okay, I appreciate if you think that was recently, but
Right.
I cannot, and I might have been about 24.
Right.
But it's hard. It was so traumatic. But I do remember I ran back and looked at the sign. I think I can't tell you.
Okay.
I thought I maybe pulled in, and I think what I read about the sign was, oh, good, they don't open until 6 a.m. I'm telling you, I missed, and I said, I'm an idiot, but I'll be out of here.
Right.
I didn't read the sign right. So I think I was off onto an empty, completely empty and closed, not open until 6 a.m. gas station. And I planned to be out of there by about 2:15 a.m., but my car was gone. I think that was the circumstances.
Okay.
JPR after dark, we know how to party. All right.
Yeah,
I appreciate
I've
it.
been to a couple of times. I was trying to think if I were at a nightclub. I don't think I was at the nightclub. Could have been, but thank
I'm
you.
gonna plead the fifth on
I was
that.
watching a band.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Pleasure to see you. All right, with that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 545. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 748 with Senator Folden.
May I bring up my panel? Sure. Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that this one is a very easy, non-controversial bill. As always. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This one's really it. Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, Senator William Folden, District 4, Frederick County. Before you today, I have SB 748 regarding military vehicles and the registration and operation of them to be able to be legally registered and utilized throughout the state. Currently, we have vehicles that are retired from military service, and because they do not have a 17-character VIN number, yet they meet every other federal motor vehicle safety standard and the like, because they have a unique identifier, but it's not 17 characters, we are unable to legally, I guess is the proper thing to say, register these vehicles. The problem is that we have some facets of the community that have these vehicles registered already, but they're registering them in different ways to kind of as an end around. We have Mission Barbecue, they have the big deuce and a halves, they have the 5-ton trucks. They take them to events only, and that's what this same bill, this legislation would be asking, is that we create this specific carve out, if you will, or an additional registration type to allow for the registration of military antique vehicles or out of commission military vehicles to be able to be used on weekends and service or veteran connected type events. And really, that's the simplest way I can make this bill to you. It's not a very controversial bill. It's about allowing people to take our veterans and kind of give them the opportunity at different events to visit these vehicles, relive these vehicles, bring their children, their grandchildren to these vehicles, and be a part of this as we continue to evolve as our military and take them out of commission. So without that, any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to my panelist here, Tom Henry, who's one of the ones that brought this to me, who was affected by this, and he can explain it to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pardon me for my voice. And I'm here to support Senate Bill 748. At this point in time, there are a lot of military vehicles that are registered in the state. That come under either street rods, historic vehicles. Some are registered as regular vehicles. There is a bulletin out from the Maryland State Police Automotive Safety Enforcement Division, bulletin number 009. It states because the VIN number is not a 17-digit and that it doesn't comply, they say that it doesn't comply with the federal motor vehicle safety standards, that the vehicles are not being allowed to be inspected. As for me, I bought a military vehicle. I contacted the MVA and asked them if military vehicles can be registered in the state of Maryland, and they said yes, they could. When I purchased mine, I worked on it for a year, got it to its safe to the state, went to MVA, got a title, got a registration plate and a registration card, and was told to go get it inspected. When I went to the inspection station told me they would not inspect it because they were told by the Maryland State Police Automotive Safety Enforcement Division that they could not because it didn't have a 17-digit VIN and it didn't comply with the federal motor vehicle safety standards. However, if you look at the attachment that I had sent up, it's the Department of Defense military standards. It's MilStant 1180B. It does say in there for that it is a requirement of the DoD and the Army to make sure that the requirements are met of the federal motor vehicle safety standards and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Association regulations. I ask that you support this so people like myself can have and operate a vehicle in the state of Maryland.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Henry, I just wanted to follow up. So I just want to make sure that it's clearly delineated that it's an issue between SHA and the Automotive Safety Enforcement Division of the State Police, because there's differing interpretations, and this would allow this to be codified, so there's no longer any differing of interpretations. Is that fair?
Yeah, motor vehicles states that they will register a vehicle. They titled it, they gave me the temporary registration and temporary registration card, told me to go out and get it inspected. I can't get inspected due to this bulletin. It's not a law. It's not a regulation. It's just a bulletin that came out from Automotive Safety Enforcement stating they are not supposed to do that. The inspector would not do this. Is said because if he did, he would lose his license to be an inspector from the state police who oversee the inspectors in the state of Maryland. The state police says, no, it's Motor Vehicles Administration that's telling us that they will not do so. And that's why this bulletin come out. So I go back and forth between both and I speak to them, and each entity passes the buck from one to the other, and I can't get anything clear. I mean, I've put a lot of money into my vehicle. I take great appreciation for my vehicle and want to support the veterans. I want to support all the military, and that's the reason I bought the vehicle. But here I just can't get a good answer from anybody.
And can you just, I think you brought it in your bag. Can you show the group that you have a registration for this that was provided to you, but you're no longer allowed to get it attached to the vehicle because you cannot get the vehicle inspected, to kind of galvanize the issue?
Here's the front plate that I was issued. I didn't take the back plate off. Here's my registration card, and behind it is insurance. I've had insurance on it since the day I had it.
Okay.
So
Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank. All right, thanks. All right, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 748, and we'll now move on to Senator Bidle with Senate Bill 679. Senator Bidle, welcome. Welcome back, I should say.
Back again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have a couple people here. There's one, Pete Barron. All right, I thought I had two, but thank you. I don't like to bring a lot of people, so you don't have a long hearing. So, good afternoon, Chairman Smith, and I guess Vice Chair Wallstreicher and everyone in the committee for hearing Senate Bill 679. For the record, I'm Pam Bidle, Anne Arundel County. Thank you for the opportunity to bring the Anne Arundel County bill. This is a delegation bill. It's at the request of my county executive. And all it does, it will enable the county to have speed monitoring systems on residential streets with a maximum posted speed of 35 miles per hour. I'm sure that you were all hearing this from your constituency about the rate of speed that we're seeing on our residential roads. So we wouldn't have to keep coming back to you. The county would be enabled to do this. Prince George's County and Montgomery County already have this authority. And I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 679.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pete Barron with the County Exec's Office. It's good to see a number of you, few new ones in the upper chamber. I won't repeat what the senator said, but the committee should have a letter of support from the delegation in your file. The county gets a lot of requests in residential zones to do something about speeding. This bill would give us the authority to create a process locally to put these devices in residential areas. With that, we ask for a favorable report and happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Oh, Mr. Carrington. We almost got away. All right, there you go. You're up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Darrell Carrington here on behalf of Census Gatsville USA. We'd like to thank the senator for leading the way on this particular bill. I'm sorry that I was a little late to testify, and I hope I'm not repeating any of the testimony, but I think we've all experienced aggressive and reckless behavior on our roadways. Our law enforcement community, it's hard for them to keep up. So this is just another tool in the toolbox to be able to assist our law enforcement personnel with being able to do their jobs and respond to the things that we're asking them to respond to and take traffic matters and minimize their time having to do that. So with that, I would ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
This question actually will be for maybe Mr. Byrne. Does the county have an idea on how it intends on citing these cameras? I mean, what would qualify a community to get a camera? How is the county looking to ensure that certain communities aren't being overburdened with these kinds of cameras? Those are some of the concerns that I have about this.
No, it's a good question, Senator. So we would, the county would use our police department, we would use the data. We would also use what kind of complaints we're getting in from the community. We believe that the local control here is folks closest to the ground are the right folks to make the decision about where we would do it. So we would have a public engagement process to allow communities to request them, just like we do for speed bumps and other traffic calming devices.
Speed bumps, it's funny because I have a lot of neighbors that like speed bumps. I hate them because they hurt my back. You go over me, they hurt. I'm serious. Sometimes I wonder if they're
Our
even
fire
ADA
department does not
compliant.
like them.
I can't stand them, but my community loves them, so I have to drive over them all the time. Do you know, do the other counties that have this, are there reporting requirements around this? Again, I think to Baltimore County and I know there's legislation over in the House looking to do the same thing in Baltimore County. These are some of the concerns that I have. So I mean, is there going to be reporting requirements? Because again, when it comes to Baltimore County and this police department, and when it comes to traffic enforcement, data wise, we have a racial problem with things. And I know, okay, you put a camera there, then that takes certain factors out of enforcement. But if you're citing them in more in certain communities versus others, then again, those are the concerns that I'm having with.
Senator, those are good thoughts. I think these do have an impact of reducing the number of interactions with law enforcement. As to your reporting requirements, I don't believe other counties that have this have anything above the normal law enforcement reporting. So we have a portal called Open Arundel where you can go and look at all sorts of data points from all across county government. I imagine data from this would also go up there.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions from the committee, thank you all very much. Thank you, Senator. Good to see you all. All right, with that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 679. We'll now move on to Senator Carrozza, I think he's here, with Senate Bill 642. Welcome.
If my panel could join me, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Smith and members of the distinguished Judicial Proceedings Committee. I am very pleased to be here this afternoon with my witnesses to present Senate Bill 642, which as amended simply becomes a local bill that would allow out-of-state recreational vehicle dealers to participate in vehicle shows for motorhomes or recreational trailers that take place within Worcester County. There should be a copy of the amendment in your packet. And if you go through it, you can see how simple this bill is. It only applies to Worcester County. These would be out-of-state dealers of motorhomes or recreational trailers that are licensed by licensing authorities of another state, that they may display or exhibit motorhomes or recreational trailers at these shows, but they may not execute a buyer's order or accept a deposit. So there have been significant changes to the original bill. We've seen the concerns of the others who are presenting today, and we believe that this amendment addresses that. The purpose of this, it would, by allowing the out-of-state RV dealers to participate in our RV shows in Ocean City, and again, display only, we believe that will increase the attendance at these shows, and as a result, would also overall increase the sales of increase the sales of those Maryland RV dealers that are participating in the shows in Worcester County. We also think this is an economic driver for the town of Ocean City, because I don't know how many of you all enjoy or have family members that are part of what I call the RV community, but they really do like to know what their options are. So by simply allowing some of these out of state, and in my district, Delaware is literally over the line. My district borders Delaware to the north and Virginia to the right. They would simply be coming in, able to display, giving our participants in the show more options. And as a result, that drives up tourism overall in Ocean City, and also those who are interested in purchasing, having more people there, you might actually have more purchases for those Maryland RV dealers that are participating. Again, I want to point out that, that we do have the amendment, and that is what we're testifying to today. I have my panel. You also will see in your packet that we have a strong letter of support from the mayor of Ocean City, from Maryland's Coast, which is our Worcester County Tourism and Visitors Office. And then you will hear from Jen Evans, who is with the Ocean City Tourism Office, Ocean City RV show promoter, Rich Hutchins, as well as Bruce Bariano. So based on this amended local bill, we would ask for favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So would you, Jen, why don't you go ahead?
Good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. Travel and tourism is a critical driver of economic growth and employment in Maryland. Millions visit Ocean City every year, drawn by the promise of unrivaled destinations and experiences, whether touring for pleasure, visiting friends and family, or conducting business. And whether exploring our 10 miles of beautiful coastline and state parks, cultural heritage, or immersing themselves in what makes our destination unique, our visitors bring an immense economic benefit to Maryland year after year. RV and van life travel have become very desirable after COVID-19. According to the 2022 KOA camping report, RV ownership has increased by 62% in the last 20 years. And in 2021, camping accounted for 40% of all leisure trips. 56% of campers are interested in RVing, and 47% want to experiment with it full time. And there's also about 43% who want to live the AKA van life. So people who want to network with like-minded travelers when creating their next mobile adventure, and Ocean City is one of the best places to learn and experience RV life because of what surrounds us. Ocean City has over 20 plus campgrounds within a 60-mile radius and 18 plus dealerships within a 60-mile radius. Our destination also embraces many outdoor activities that RV life seeks, which is bike riding, fishing, canoeing, kayaking, bird watching, hiking, and more. The Ocean City East Coast travelers from Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, and more. And we would like to include surrounding RV dealerships at our show, increasing the diversity and product mix, in turn, giving the consumer more options to look and more reasons to visit our town when considering RV options. There will be businesses from many different states showcasing their products, destinations, and inventive solutions for life on the road. And we would like to include our Maryland dealerships and our local regions on display. So I strongly respectfully request that this committee provide Senate Bill 642 with favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. The internet has created a new normal for the way consumers search for RVs, automobiles. We are now only a click away from purchasing an automobile on Google. Though many sales are still made in traditional fashion, the influence of the internet has led many consumers to not only shop online, but also do their research prior to marketing purchase. The results in a faster transaction and more educated consumers. RV shows are the best place to allow consumers to physically look at lots of options in one location. However, Maryland does not have all manufacturers accounted for in their dealerships to be able to display at the show. Airstream, Scamp, Oliver, ATC, Roadtrek, and a few of the other 45 manufacturers not represented in the state of Maryland. As the RV van life movement continues to expand, we want Worcester County to become a must-visit destination for those traveling in an RV or a van. Amending this law would allow our region to be able to showcase a vast number of RVs available for purchase. Currently, the closest RV dealerships are located in Delaware. 6 of the top 10 closest dealerships are less than 45 miles from Ocean City, Maryland. The closest and only Eastern Shore, Maryland licensed dealer is BOE RV, and they are 74 miles away. The remaining 8 Maryland dealers are 90 to 140 miles away from Ocean City. Anyone who wants to purchase an RV from a dealer at our show will not leave with an RV. The final sale and paperwork will take place at the dealership to ensure laws are followed. And similar to those purchasing a vehicle out of state, that dealer, whether in-state or out of state, will process all of the Maryland taxes, titles, tags necessary for the state of Maryland. Maryland is not losing out on state taxes. I strongly respectfully request that the committee provide State Senate Bill 642 with a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. For the record, Bruce Berriano, I'm here on behalf of the mayor and the City Council of Ocean City again. I would urge a very favorable report to this. As I think you know, the state has spent a great deal of money in building and expanding the convention center. People come to the convention center. It's a tremendous economic boom for the region of Ocean City. Taxes collected, expenses, meals, hotels, entertainment. There's a tremendous state interest in this bill, even though, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this is a local bill. There's no effort to hurt any in-state RVs. The closest RV dealer, as I understand, to Ocean City is 10 miles away. There are many of them in Delaware. As you know, Ocean City being on a peninsula, they're really in an awkward geographical area. It's not easy to get to. There are confined routes to get there. And in order to have a successful RV, you want to expand what you can look at and observe. I think the amendments are reasonable. It's a totally local bill. It's clear you cannot make any sales or book anything. Senator Carrozza spoke with the manager of the convention center before this hearing, who indicated that would be enforced so that there would not, by the staff of the convention center, so that there would not be any sales or bookings or anything like that. It is solely display. And then the potential buyer can go to his or her dealership, wherever that may be, in Delaware or in Maryland, wherever, and consummate their desires and their purchases. Would urge a favorable report to this, and really just want to emphasize there's a lot of state interest in promoting and expanding the use and the vitality of the convention center, which is a partnership between the state of Maryland and the city of Ocean City. Thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Let me start off, maybe Mr. Barriano can answer this. It's been asserted several times this is a Worcester County bill. I can't find anything in the bill itself that says the changes are only applicable to Worcester County.
The amendments, please, Senator. It's the amendments that make it a local bill and also restrict the activity that could be transacted.
Okay, I have one amendment. I guess I don't have in front of me the second amendment.
There was amendments earlier and then we amended the bill after the House hearing. So the amendments that I don't think we received in time to be uploaded.
Okay.
And then if you turn it over, you.
So this is now the bill.
Right, this probably answers my.
This is really the bill.
Okay, so it's just a
now.
Worcester County bill. So secondly, I represent Timonium. And currently the Timonium Fairgrounds hosts 2 of these shows a year. And as I look on the second page of the bill, it says that a new vehicle owner or a licensed vehicle salesman who's employed by the dealer may participate in 2 annual vehicle shows for each dealer location. Is this bill going to divert people who otherwise would show in Timonium at the 2 shows each year in Timonium and take them down to Ocean City instead and leave Timonium with fewer people showing? Is that what's going to happen?
The only intent of the bill, again, it's a local bill, the only intent of the bill is that the show in Worcester County would allow out-of-state RV dealers to display only at the Ocean City show.
But if the current Maryland licensed dealers show in Timonium twice a year, and if the law says you can only participate in 2 shows, is it
In Worcester County.
in this? Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Let me look
there's
at the
no
amendment,
caps.
see if this changes this.
There's no caps, are there?
Let's see.
There's no caps, right?
No.
So we clarified that with our DLS analysts that there are no caps on the number of shows.
Well, this language of the existing law says a new vehicle dealer or licensed vehicle salesman is employed by the dealer may participate in 2 annual vehicle shows for each dealer location. Okay. Well, I'm told this is it.
The
So,
intent, but sincerely,
what I
Senator,
want to make,
the intent is not to interfere with Timonium. We're well aware of the shows there.
Okay.
They're very, very popular, and we're not trying to compete with that. To my knowledge, I mean, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, the shows are not even at the same time or on the same date or anything like that. And I would think that that would not make any sense for someone to have a show when they know there's going to be one at the Timonium Fairgrounds. as
okay,
well.
well, being aware of my concern about this, could you take another look at the bill?
Yeah, we
And
definitely
before
will.
we come to a voting session.
So we'll clarify that.
Definitely
Satisfy
will.
my
We will
concern
clarify that.
that in some way this would impair the shows in Timonium.
Do not want to do that at all.
Okay.
We'll make sure of that. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you all very much. Thank you, Senator Rosa. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good to see you all. All right, so with that, we'll go on to I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We'll go on to the opposition panel and we'll hear from Gregory Merkel, Mr. Merkel, and James Doyle.
Good afternoon, James Doyle on behalf of the Maryland Recreational Vehicle Dealers Association. These are the licensed Maryland dealers located in Maryland. And we oppose the bill. I'd like to say at the outset, we all like Ocean City and would like to see it do well. But the last time I checked, Ocean City was still had not yet seceded from the state of Maryland. And that means that the licensing laws that apply throughout the state apply to Worcester County and Ocean City, as well as anywhere else in the state of Maryland. And I would like to just in the short amount of time that I have, make three arguments, short arguments on why this is a very bad bill. First is that it discriminates against Maryland licensed dealers who are here now, who pay fees for the dealership, who pay fees for each salesman, who maintain a fixed location with service facilities as they're required to do under Maryland law, who maintain records that are open for inspection at any time by MDE or by MVA rather. So they comply with all the Maryland laws. They pay all the Maryland fees. They employ Maryland residents. Secondly, this is not a reciprocal bill. So we could have dealers coming in from all over the place, all over the country, not just Delaware, coming into Worcester County. None of our dealers in Maryland are going to be able to go into any of those other states without obtaining a license from those other states. So this is entirely a one-way bill. And the third thing I will just say is it's important to read that this is really a consumer protection issue. And if you read that third paragraph from MDOT MVA, and I'll just read it, it's 3 sentences. The MDOT Maryland Vehicle Administration oversees dealership regulations and enforcement along with licensees for salesmen. The MVA only has authority to enforce Maryland laws around vehicles and trailer sales for businesses and salesmen licensed in Maryland. Any dealers and their salesmen who are not licensed in Maryland and conduct business at vehicle shows in the state would not be subject to consumer law enforcement for any sales made at these shows as a result. So in terms of consumer protection, you can make it a local bill or you can make it a statewide bill. The consumer protection laws are out wherever this bill is enacted. Thank you, and I request an unfavorable report.
Excellent. I will hear from one more witness.
I'm Greg Merkel from Leo's Vacation Center, a licensed Maryland dealer. We've operated for over 50 years in the state of Maryland. We paid our bonds, our fees, our taxes. We're heavily regulated by MDOT. We have to, with the consumer protection, if we're bonded, so if we wrong a customer or if we do something that they contest, the consumer has a lot of avenues to go, and they can go against our bond or bring us up, and hold us responsible for doing the right thing. We're also not, we're licensed in Maryland. If we want to do business in another state, we would have to obtain an address and be licensed in another state, whether it be Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia. We can't do business in those states unless we obtain an address and a license. So I think it's unfair, and it gives precedence. Even if it's, I don't know how you can regulate it to one county when it's a state, basically a MDOT state law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for you, sir, the association.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. They're going to ask you to go up there. So I'm a little confused. We have the RV show in Timonium. 2 of them.
Yes.
Are we, what's the difference between what's proposed in Ocean City compared to the RV show in Timonium?
Well, there's a lot of differences. I don't know if you're talking about the original bill or the amended bill.
Well,
but
the
they're
amended,
both the same.
because the original.
The original bill. The original bill would make this a statewide issue where any dealer that's licensed in any other state, but not Maryland, from any of the other 49 states would be able to come into Maryland and sell RVs in Maryland without having a license by MVA.
So,
and without having a license from MVA, all of the consumer protection provisions of Maryland Code and COMAR, which there are extensive regulations, they're out the window. Maryland MVA would have no authority to enforce any of those consumer protection laws against any of those out-of-state dealers that came into Maryland and did not obtain a Maryland license.
So at the Timonium show, there are no out-of-state dealers?
That's correct. Those are
Okay.
all Maryland licensed dealers. And let me just add one other thing I think is relevant to your question. There are national RV companies around the country that conduct business in many states. They get licenses in many states. There's nothing to prevent under this bill or under the Maryland law for a Delaware dealer, Michigan dealer, New Jersey dealer, from any of those dealers in another state, from coming into Maryland, applying through the process and getting an MVA license and subjecting itself to the jurisdiction of the MVA for these various consumer protection provisions.
You may or may not know the answer to this question, but we have the auto show in Baltimore. So does this, I know that this bill doesn't apply to the auto show, but in theory, can only authorized dealers in Maryland show at the auto show in?
I'm a little out of my field on that, but the only thing I will note on that is that the automobile dealers, as I understand it, have filed an opposition to this bill, not because they are bound by this bill, but because of the precedent that it would set.
Right, I'm trying to compare apples to apples.
Right, so I'm giving you the best that I can. The automobile dealers have also, to my understanding, opposed this bill on the basis that it will set a precedent that will apply to them as well.
Okay, and I'll reserve it for later. Thank you, sir.
I'm following up on your comments, and I'm glad you spoke because I now have a fuller picture of this. So, because one of my questions was, why can't an out-of-state dealer get a license? So could you just tell me, they don't have to be an out-of-state dealership who wants to show in Ocean City could get a Maryland license without doing brick and mortar. Or just tell me that. How much commitment does an out-of-state dealer who really just wants to show at Ocean City, what would they have to do to get a?
Well, it's a fair amount of commitment because you don't bring one or two or three or four vehicles down to show them. You bring a large number down to show them and to try to sell those vehicles. But the Maryland law has a lot of consumer protection divisions in it. And a couple of those are, for example, that a Maryland dealer must have a fixed location in the state where it maintains all of its records relating to the contracts for the sale of the vehicles, the warranties, disclaimer of warranties, all of which are governed by particular provisions of Maryland law. It also has provisions in it in the Maryland law that a Maryland dealer must have either at its location or nearby, as approved by MVA, a service facility where the vehicles that are sold are going to be serviced. And it further provides, for example, I'll just take this out of the air. The Maryland law has extensive regulations on, for example, trade-ins. There are oftentimes you trade in an older vehicle for a newer vehicle. Well, the amount of trade-in that is allowed for an older vehicle to be applied to a newer vehicle can vary. And that, of course, can affect the excise price that's paid to the state of Maryland.
Right.
So Maryland MVA requires a Maryland dealer to have a fixed location, not just for the service part, but also for the records part, so that it can come in when it wishes and look at how these sales are being conducted, how the contracts are written, how the warranties are written, all that stuff, how trade-ins are handled. If you do not have a Maryland dealer that's licensed in Maryland, subject to the jurisdiction of the Motor Vehicle Administration, you have an MVA that has no jurisdiction over that out-of-state dealer to enforce any Maryland consumer.
And just so the
protection
committee
laws.
understands, that means that if there is a bad sale in Maryland by an out-of-state dealer, the Maryland resident has no recourse to reach that dealer unless there's some other way. You certainly couldn't get him under the.
He could not get him under Maryland
So-
law through the
There'd be
MBA.
no protection, but so I want to just clarify though, because it's, you sort of said, oh, you can get a license, but just like we all understand, to get that license, I thought, oh, great, you spend a couple $100, you have a resident agent, which might, be somebody who could be served and things like that. But it's a lot more of a commitment, just so we understand.
It
Lot
is,
more of a
it
commitment.
requires, because of for example, the record
I
keeping
have one last question
requirements,
after that.
which are a 3-year requirement.
Right.
MVA wants the right to come in and look at records over that entire period of time. It requires a fixed location so it can do that. It also requires a fixed location so it can make sure that the dealer has the adequate facilities to do, for example, warranty repairs and that sort of thing. So it's not just a matter of filling out some paperwork
No.
and sending it in.
Well, I just didn't want people to think it would be an easy fix for us to just let them get licenses. So here's the sort of the last thing I wanted to ask. And actually, the sponsor of the bill could answer it too. Could this not be fixed if at the Ocean City RV show, can an out-of-state dealer just display the vehicles for people to look at if they are interested? And then if the person's interested, they can then get a card and follow that dealer wherever they.
Well,
No, I mean, so you're not, so it's. Wait a minute, let me finish the question. So the point is that they're not going to consummate a sale there. They're just seeing it. It's like on a display. Here it is. Here's your card. If you like my vehicle, come to my dealership next week.
Yeah.
No sale has occurred at all.
right. No sale has occurred.
So is
but
that, how
that-
do you, why would you have a problem with that?
Yes, because in fact, that's not the way things work. You bring large numbers of vehicles down to these shows. You don't bring a half a dozen. You bring a lot down.
Mhm.
You bring salespeople down. While you may not actually consummate the sale in terms of signing a contract at the show, or you may.
I know, but assume we don't let them do
Assume
that.
that you
and they're just-
don't.
They're just
assume-
window shopping.
Assume that you don't. You're still having the sales of those vehicles occur. Except for the sale of the contract. Maryland dealers, for example, are not permitted to do that. A Maryland dealer can show at the show. He can have salesmen talk to the people about being interested in buying this vehicle. But when it comes down to signing the contract and acknowledging warranties, et cetera, and for delivery of the vehicle, for all of those kinds of things that go along with that, that must be done at the fixed location of the Maryland dealer. It cannot be done at the show. So if you're going to have out-of-state people coming down, they're going to be, in effect, doing things that the Maryland dealers are not permitted to do.
All right, well, this has all been very helpful. I've learned a little bit as we
Okay.
get through this bill. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to be clear that this bill is just showing the vehicle. There's no sale.
There's no sale until there's a sales contract that is signed, I suppose you would technically say.
But not in the state of Maryland.
In the
You have
state
to
of
go
Maryland,
somewhere
you
else to
cannot
buy it.
sign, in the state of Maryland, you cannot sign the sales contract at the show. That has to be signed back at the fixed location of the dealer.
Right, but that's what this bill is. There is no selling. It is just showing.
But the problem is if out-of-state dealers decide, look, I'm going to sell the thing, we're going to sign the contract, there is no one to enforce that provision. There's no one, MVA can't say that sale is illegal, we're going to suspend your license.
However, if I live in Delaware, in Rehoboth, I buy an RV in Rehoboth, then 2 months later, I move to Maryland, and then I want to register my RV in Maryland. Are you telling me that the Maryland MVA won't register that RV?
No, they'll register, you'll have to.
Right, but all the same things apply.
Yeah,
I understand your opposition. But it's not really holding water with me, because the opposite is, if we're worried about dealers coming in and not having the bricks and mortar where the paperwork is or where the insurance is and all the different things that MVA is requiring for a bricks and mortar facility in the state of Maryland, the reverse of what I hear you saying is, if you purchase it and it's manufactured somewhere else, don't bring it to Maryland, because Maryland's not going to be able to stand by and do all the concerns that we're bringing. So at the end of the day, it's almost like we should prevent the internet from even showing these things, because it's an out-of-state company. Anyhow.
I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, as a practical matter, you're not going to have, at the Toronto show, for example, they have 300 vehicles. You're not going to have 300 vehicles just sitting there. You're going to have salespeople there. You're going to have salespeople pushing the sale of those shows, even if the contract happens to be signed back in Delaware. And that, for that reason, I believe it's MVA that has the rule in terms of display, what a display is, and does not allow those kinds of facilities, or does not allow those kinds of events where you in effect have sales being made up as a point of signing the contract. If you're going to do that, then you need to become licensed in Maryland and live by the Maryland consumer protection laws. And that's the position of MVA. And I think unless you're going to say we're going to have 50 different or 49 different rules in the country on who can come into Maryland and what they can promise and what they can have in their contracts and warranties, then you really don't have any consumer protection at that point.
And so, not to get another industry in trouble, but motorcycles. I remember being in Western Maryland, motorcycles being on display at our local mall. But because our local ordinance wouldn't allow a motorcycle dealership to even come in, they were allowed to show, but you went up to, which is only 6 miles away in Pennsylvania, to be able to sell. So I don't know what the difference is between RVs and motorcycles.
Well, in terms of motorcycles and RVs, what you're talking
Couple more
about,
wheels.
what you're talking about, motorcycle dealers, in spite of what you said, I think in terms of the number of shows they could have, motorcycle dealers were still required to be licensed by MVA if they were going to show and have a show in Maryland and sell motorcycles in Maryland. They still needed to have that MVA license for consumer protection requirements. The other thing was, for motorcycles, at some point, and I don't remember when this was, but at some point motorcycles were allowed to have more than 2 shows a dealer. The effect of that was really to dilute the desire, let's say, or the incentive for people to buy motorcycles, because you had so many motorcycle shows around that you just had too many of them. And so that's why the law for RVs has been limited basically to 2 shows per dealer.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I can see both sides of this. I can see what Ocean City and this wants to do, and I hear your concern. And I think we should all not want to lift the consumer protections from the sale of vehicles, or RVs, and also put a handicap with all the compliance and restrictions that you do. But it seems to me we could be creative in some way about if we allow these out-of-state dealers to do this, to more strictly prohibit the hard sell at these shows, make it really a display only. Now, I'm just thinking I'm thinking out of the box here a little bit, where I get that what Ocean City wants is more people to come and look at things. I don't know if it makes too much difference how many RVs get sold at Ocean City, but I think it matters that how many, items they have for people to look at and bring in crowds for other revenue generating aspects of Ocean City. For you all, you're like, okay, that's fine. But what we don't want to do is compromise the very long thought out strategic way we protect consumers in the second largest purchase of their life. And probably with an RV could be the largest purchase. So I think there's got to be a way, and we might not be ready right now, for us to figure out how there can be some element of display by the dealers out of state. I don't know if we can do this, but the dealers out of state, but also make sure that they're not in a position to go toe to toe in the sales and undercut the intent and the protections that we built up for decades, if not longer, for the state of Maryland.
I would just say in response, that you need, if you're thinking along those lines at all, to remember the three things
Yes.
we're talking about, which are,
I wrote it down.
look, Maryland dealers are paying the fees, they're paying the Maryland taxes, they're employing Maryland citizens to work there at their shops. Out-of-state dealers are not. That's number one. Number
Right.
two, there is no reciprocity on this. So you're having
I know, that's a
potentially
good, you made a
50
good point.
and Maryland dealers have to go get licensed when they want to sell or display in another state. And then, of course, number three, and that's the letter that you should have from MVA that
Okay.
says, look, we will have no jurisdiction over any consumer protection laws in Maryland regarding the sale of vehicles at these.
And what I'm
shows.
telling you is, I think all of those things we should not ignore if we would even to let this to happen in some modified way. But so I hear what you're saying. I'm just trying to
Right.
figure out a way to move forward. But thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Committee. All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you. All right. With that, that'll conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 642. We'll now move on to Senator McCray with Senate Bill 857.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tamika. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tamika Winkler, and I'm here to introduce SB 857 on behalf of Senator McCray. This is a local bill. It has not been heard in Baltimore City Senate delegation yet. It will be heard on tomorrow. I urge you to support in approving Senate Bill 857. The purpose of this bill is to improve our traffic control systems. Senate Bill 857 will require violations recorded by the control signal and speed monitoring systems occurring in Baltimore City to be treated as parking violations. By law, in any political subdivision of the state may adopt ordinances of regulations that regulate the parking of vehicles, provide for impounding of vehicles parked in violation of the ordinances or regulations, regulate the towing of vehicles from public owned and privately owned parking lots, provide for the assurances of a citation by an officer for a violation of an ordinance or regulation that is adopted under the section. It is imperative that the rules and regulations listed in Senate Bill 857 are followed. As a consequence of disobeying these expectations, the violator will receive a penalty once violations accrue to $1,000. Impoundment would not begin before the citation limit is reached. Bear in mind that all actions will be recorded in Baltimore City. For these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable vote for SB 857. Thank you for allowing me to introduce this bill. Am I able to introduce my panel? We have Liam Davis from Baltimore City.
Thank you, Tamika. Chair Smith, who I know is not here, and members of the committee, thank you so much for providing us the opportunity to hear this important legislation, Senate Bill 857. So speaking on behalf of Baltimore City Administration, again, my name is Liam Davis, Legislative Affairs Manager with Baltimore City Department of Transportation. So Senate Bill 857 is a fairly simple bill. We are looking to expand the city's ability to impound vehicles that have amassed over $1,000 in moving violations resulting from automated enforcement cameras. The legislation is similar to the city's existing authority to impound vehicles with 3 or more active parking tickets that have not been paid for 30 days. As a reminder, Baltimore City utilizes automated traffic enforcement cameras to promote safety and to get our vehicles to drive at slower, safer speeds. Fines are currently capped at $40 per automated speed ticket and $75 per automated red light violation. And this means that in order to hit that $1,000 threshold, a driver would need to amass over 25 unpaid speeding tickets or 13 unpaid red light violations to hit that $1,000 threshold. Research conducted by the Baltimore City Department of Transportation has found that there are over 4,354 vehicles that currently have over $1,000 in unpaid automated citations, totaling over 133,000 individual violations. To put that in perspective, there's 4,293 of those violating vehicles meeting that $1,000 threshold are actually cars that are registered in Maryland. That 4,293 number, excuse me, I'm just going to make this one point. It represents less than 0.1% of all the vehicles registered in Maryland. So we're really targeting chronic offenders who are speeding recklessly and driving recklessly through our red lights and putting our citizens in danger. With that in mind, Baltimore City respectfully requests a favorable report on Senate Bill 857. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janelle Mummy from the Baltimore City Administration, representing the Baltimore City Administration. I'm here. Nina Demolis was signed up, but she is out today, and so I'm representing her. And I just would like to say, me too, please support. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Mr. Vice Chair, Ryan Dorsey, Baltimore City Council. Glad to be here before you today, testifying in support of this bill. And I'm thankful to the administration and to Senator McCray for bringing this concept that I brought to their attention. Look, as Liam said a moment ago, we can.
Good to see you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Actually, sorry, Councilmember, if you could just turn it's the
I gotta
YouTube
turn off
feed.
my YouTube here.
Yeah,
sorry. Sorry.
No worries.
As Liam said, we already have the authority to immobilize or impound vehicles for just 3 $32 parking tickets, right? You can overrun a meter for 5 minutes. And if you don't pay 3 of those tickets, after having harmed nobody, presented no real threat to anybody in the process of overstaying a meter for 5 minutes, we can immobilize or impound your car. But if you rack up literally $10,000 in citations for running speed and red light cameras day in and day out, as is the case with some people licensed in Maryland, we can't do anything at the local level. This $1,000 threshold is actually a precedent already set in state law. A local jurisdiction who finds that a vehicle has more than $1,000 of outstanding citations can already notify the MVA of this under a term in state law for chronic offenders. If you have more than $1,000 due to any local jurisdiction, the MVA can already issue a notice of immediate suspension or revocation of the registration of that vehicle and order that the owner immediately turn in the tags to the MVA. What this bill does is just put a tool in our local hands here to be able to address this more swiftly if we happen to see that car, because we also know that a lot of the vehicles that are reaching this chronic offender status are already driving around on unregistered tags. They're already evading the law on a day-to-day basis. This basically just gives us the tool that if we happen to come across this vehicle or are able to find this vehicle that has been causing mayhem on city streets, we have the power to immobilize it and disable its ability to cause this kind of mayhem on a day in, day out basis. So I urge a favorable report.
Excellent.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Councilmember. We have a question from Senator Sidnor.
Thank you. And I believe I was watching the news just a few weeks ago, and it was talking about the city's issues with collecting on, I guess, speed camera tickets and the like. Would you mind speaking to that? I mean, I think it's, I can't recall if it said it was just over 50%, 50-some% of tickets or something in the report.
So generally, we have about a rolling average, I think about like around 75 to 80% collection rate. I believe it's a little lower for the 83 speed camera program because it's been up and running for less than a year. So I actually don't think this would really move the needle that much on the collection rate, because it's really only going to impact drivers of vehicles that have accrued over $1,000 worth of citations.
And as I'm reading this is specifically for people who have violated the laws within Baltimore City, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm curious about, I mean, and again, I certainly you want people who are violating the law to pay what they need to pay, but the impoundment, that's a pretty harsh penalty for people who may need that vehicle for their livelihoods. How often does Baltimore City use its impoundment powers for things like parking tickets?
Very regularly. And we could get the committee the official data in terms of how many vehicles are impounded monthly and annually.
How much does that kind of cost somebody who gets themselves caught in that situation to then get their vehicles back?
So our rates at our towing facilities, and I am sympathetic as someone who for most of my life lives paycheck to paycheck, even today, really. So I understand how much a $300 or $400 charge can really hurt somebody in the pocketbook. The thing to keep in mind about our towing division and our impound lot is it's actually more affordable generally than what you see from the private towers. Our fee for a municipal tow is $140, and there are additional storage and administrative costs that we are prepared to talk about today as well. James Turner, who is with us, is actually on the trespass tow board and is the secretary. So it's $140 for towing, $50 for storage, $40 for admin, and I believe after 48 hours, it's $15 per day.
And the last question, I know, in parking, that's if you're parking improperly, that's a very easy violation to see. And but with the speeding cameras, and I'm not saying this is about Baltimore City, but I recall just reading an article just some time ago talking about how jurisdictions that have these cameras, they weren't properly ensuring that they were calibrated properly. And so you had people getting tickets that may not really have violated the law. With Baltimore City's program, how often do you all calibrate your cameras?
So our speed cameras are calibrated very regularly. It's done by the vendor. We also have quality assurance analysts in addition to Baltimore City Police Department that are verifying the tickets as they come in. I know that at least on the earliest days of the 83 camera program, they were checking those cameras daily to make sure they were properly calibrated.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Senator, may I respond to one thought on that? The cameras really are providing a significant safety benefit, and I want to be clear that that's what's at the core here. It's not about collections. There was a question from Senator Sidnor about the collections rate. Before bringing this idea to the administration, called the chiefs of staff of the other jurisdictions in Maryland that have cameras and asked them what they do when they have people who violate to extreme degrees like we're talking about here. What do they do? Because nobody is allowed to immobilize or impound for this type of ticket with speed and red light cameras. And they said, we take people to court. We sue them for the money. We file a suit against them individually, the owners of the vehicle. And when we're talking about like the hardship that can be placed on somebody by something like towing, I would keep in mind that if we're trying to keep people safe from very dangerous drivers, like we're talking about here, there is certainly the safety factor of those who could be harmed by those drivers that I would say is a much graver concern than a $250 impoundment. And that I think that there's a lot more harm potentially that can happen as a result of filing a suit against somebody for $10,000 in violations like this. Whereas I would say having their vehicle impounded to protect public safety is probably in a way a lot less oppressive. And again, it's not necessarily a matter of they just need this vehicle to get from place to place if they can't seem to get anywhere without getting violations, like the kind of offenders that we're talking about here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Sidnor really opened the door to what I was thinking about in terms of this bill. And knowing that Baltimore is a tale of two cities, with a high concentration of people living in impoverishment, knowing that we still don't have a secured $15 an hour minimum wage. So a $40 ticket is more than 2 hours, almost 3 hours of work for someone that is even making $15 an hour. So my question is more designed to asking if maybe even after the hearing, you could provide information. I'm interested if you have the data on where most of these violations are occurring, and also the neighborhoods to kind of, I'd like to see the breakdown of who's getting, who this is going to mostly impact, because I think it's not a terrible idea, but I don't want to take someone who can't afford to pay the tickets and then their car is impounded and then their whole life is ruined.
Right.
And it could really happen. It could have that ripple effect.
Right. We are totally,
Senator.
and I know you want to speak, Councilman. I was going to mention, thank you, Senator, for that feedback. It's something we don't take lightly, and we take it very seriously at City DOT. One of the great things we did in terms of research over the past year at the direction of Councilman Dorsey was to pull all of our ATVS data. We looked at a 90-day window of all the tickets issued within a 90-day period. And what we found, I think Councilman Dorsey can give specifics. What we found, though, was that in every location where there is a speed camera, generally it was like around 80% of the violations were occurring from vehicles that originated with their registration from outside the zip code. So what that means is it's a lot of times, more than 80% of the time, it's not the people living in the neighborhoods themselves that are doing the speeding. It's the people that are traveling through the neighborhoods that are doing the speeding. And, you know, in terms of like where this is happening, I'm confident to say it's happening everywhere, all throughout the city. And we have all the data. If the committee wants the data, we can share it with the committee and the chair so you guys can look at it. But it's very alarming. You know, the councilman mentioned someone with over $10,000 in fees. We have that. People that have racked up $11,000 in speeding and red light camera violations. Like they might have trouble paying, but at the same time, that doesn't give you a blanket, you know, authority to speed and drive through red lights throughout the city. You're putting the public in danger.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I don't know if I think it might be counterproductive though to go after them, because if they are a person that just doesn't have the money and the most likely their car might not be the greatest, and they're just like, oh, take the car and down the car. I can't, the car is not worth it. So
We might
I
help.
think the car is what's enabling people to really create unsafe conditions basically wherever they go, right? I mean, I looked at the top 20 ticket getters in the city, and they all had more than $5,000 of unpaid citations, all acquired within the last year and a half. And I mean, that's an incredible rate of dangerous driving. In some cases, that means that every other day you are getting a citation for speeding or running red lights in Baltimore City. And out of those top 20 ticket getters, one of them was current in their registration. So these are people who are already unlawfully driving around on these vehicles in the first place. This gives us the tool to be able to stop that. To Liam's point, to put a fine point on it, we looked at the location of every single red light and speed camera in Baltimore City. We looked at the zip code that it is in, and we looked at the zip code of registration of every single vehicle and every ticket that was issued to every single vehicle by that specific camera. So we have exactly who is getting ticketed at each camera. And like he said, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of tickets given by any individual camera are not to people who live in the zip code where that camera is located. 50% of them, more or less, are not even being issued to people who live within the jurisdiction. And these cameras are pretty evenly spread out all throughout the city. And that same pattern holds true for essentially every camera in the city.
really quickly, not to belabor this, could it be the case when someone has those multiple violations, and I understand they'd be an exception, but I just want to ask, get the answer if I can. Someone that has those multiple violations, could it be a situation where maybe they work the night shift or the late shift and they got to drive by the same school every day? It's the middle of the night, no traffic's on the road, the school is closed, nevertheless, the camera takes the ticket, takes the picture. And not to excuse the behavior, but I know how I feel if I worked all night and had to get home in the morning and there's nobody on the road.
That
So
could
I'm just
only
saying-
happen. That could only happen if they were running red lights in the middle of the night, because the speed cameras stop operating in the early evening.
Okay.
The school zone speed cameras are only operational.
I know that's supposed to be the case. I wasn't certain it worked that way, but I know it's supposed to be the case.
is
We talked about that
definitely
earlier with the bill. But I wasn't sure if it really worked that way. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just have a couple quick questions. So who does the enforcement of this? Does police ever help? Do the police officers, does the police department ever help with this?
Yeah, so it's a partnership. So automated enforcement is run by ATVS division, which is within CDDOT.
No, but when you're going to go get these cars, like who would help with that?
So also within DOT, we have traffic enforcement officers. These are sworn officers, although separate from BPD, they're unarmed. They hold a license plate reader, and they're literally walking down a block
No, but I mean,
And-
when you're going to go, let's say you're trying to go get a vehicle, let's say you've got the registration. You know where the vehicle is.
Mhm.
The person's got over the threshold or whatever, $1,000 of fines. Does BPD help do that to go get that car?
I don't think that that's how we would see this happening. It would be more so as a traffic enforcement officer who does parking enforcement, as they're targeting an area. So like, let's say they're targeting an RPP area or they're
So the car
downtown.
would be parked on the street. and
Yeah, it'd just
that's
be-
how it would work.
And it would just be randomly.
My
picked up.
question is then, sorry, it's been a
Mhm.
long hearing. Is this that, so if the council member just mentioned that 50% are from out of the city.
Mhm.
And most of them are not even in the jurisdiction in which the infraction occurs, which
Mhm.
means they're probably from another part of the city. So my question would be then, you get their registration, you've got their license, you know where the car is essentially, if they live where their car is supposed to be. So my question would be, would this bill allow for resources from the city, like BPD or whatever else, whatever agency or support, to go down to Montgomery County, for instance? Let's say I work in the city and I run up $1,000, you know where I live. My car's in Silver Spring. Would you? That's the question. Would
Yeah,
resources be used outside of the
Yeah,
jurisdiction to enforce this?
I don't think that that's our intent. And so in a great example of that, again, we did it in our written testimony. The closest parallel here is scoff law, which is 3 or more unpaid parking tickets that are 30 days or older. We're not sending TEOs outside of Baltimore City to track down people who haven't paid parking tickets.
So what do you do for say if you, unless the vehicle's in the jurisdiction, then you're not gonna go out and go get them. Yeah.
And back to Senator Sidner's point about collection rate, that's why we don't actually think this is going to have a significant impact on collection rate. And as Councilman Dorsey said, the top priority here is public safety.
Got it. Additional questions? Awesome. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member.
Thank you. I'm also here for the next bill.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, hang tight then. All right. That will end the hearing for Senate Bill 857. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 599, Senator Carter.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman Smith and all the members of the committee. Same panel as the last bill. Senate Bill 599 is brought on behalf of the city administration. And so I've got Liam Davis, Stephanie Murdoch sitting in for Nina Themelis and Ryan Dorsey, who's still virtual. So this bill is designed to really help our residents and consumers to stay free of oppressive excessive towing fees. Senate Bill 599 provides clarification to local jurisdictions regarding fees that tow companies can charge for trespass towing by removing the language referencing total fees and amending it to simply fee. Senate Bill 599 provides clearer guidance to local jurisdictions and how tow companies on what fee rates can be authorized. Based on the current iteration of the statute, the ability to double total fees has led to more ambiguity and less clarity for local governments, including Baltimore City. The ambiguity has at times resulted in fees submitted to the Baltimore City Trespass Towing Board in excess of the authorized doubling of municipal rates. Ultimately, the excessive fees can burden the citizens and visitors of Baltimore City, adding a financial hardship in times of fiscal uncertainty. Also, please take into consideration a recent formal opinion submitted by the Maryland Attorney General, specifically opinion 107 OAGO 931. Hopefully it is in your packet and certainly we can distribute it to you if you don't have it, which states that total fees allowed to be doubled should only be the towing fee and not include the storage, administrative, or other miscellaneous fees. Passing Senate Bill 599 would effectively codify the Attorney General opinion and help to clarify authorized trespass towing rates. For those reasons, on behalf of the city of Baltimore, I urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Senator Carter, for introducing this really important piece of legislation. And Chair Smith, thank you again for the opportunity to speak before the Judiciary Committee about Senate Bill 599. I'm not going to speak too much more. I think Senator Carter hit all the main points. I do want to stress that this is a good government bill. It is very simple. We're essentially changing one word in the existing statute, changing it from total fees to just fee, and that clears things up, reduces the level of confusion. And our goal here is to reduce the amount of tack-on fees that our residents and citizens and stakeholders are getting when they have their cars towed from private property. I do want to stress, because we've had some interesting testimony in the House, but I want to stress that in Baltimore City, the Trespass Tow Board will continue to set the rates. And we are working collaboratively with the trespass towers. This is a partnership, but at the same time, we feel the need to clear up this confusion and look out for our residents and consumers. I'm going to hand it over to James Turner, who is our secretary for the Trespass Tow Board.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith and members of the committee. I'm happy to be here today. My name is James Turner. I'm an analyst in the Government Affairs and Policy Office within DOT, and I'm also the secretary of the Board of Licensing for Towing Services. Happy to be here in committee. Chair Smith, you actually spoke in my class two semesters ago, and yes. So since the inception of the board, the discussion surrounding trespass tow rates has been overly complicated. The amendment proposed in SB 599 simply adds clarity to abstruse wording. Based on the Attorney General's interpretation of the statute, only one fee can be doubled, the towing fee. Hence, amending the word total fees should eliminate any confusion that multiple fees are subject to said doubling. We want to be clear, SB 0599 has no effect on the board's authority to issue, create, or amend the trespass towing fee structure within the city of Baltimore. Furthermore, in 2023, the board has committed to a complete and in-depth fiscal analysis of towing fees within the city. The analysis will include input from industry representative, the towers, citizens, and other stakeholders. If passed, the amended language would serve as a starting point to meaningful conversation rather than obscure arguments regarding the meaning of total fees. For these reasons, the board and myself respectfully request a favorable report on SB 599. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Janelle Mummy from the Baltimore City Administration, and here to just say again, me too, everything's been said, and please support this bill. Thank you.
Councilmember, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is a point that I've labored over for several years as I served as a member of the Trespass Towing Board for 4 years, seeing trespass towers charge well over what my reading of the existing law led me to believe was the allowable maximum. I did everything that I could to argue as a member of the Trespass Towing Board that for the interpretation that eventually the Attorney General actually gave. So it is true that despite the way that the law is written right now, much more than is legally allowable per the Attorney General's opinion has been charged for many, many years. And so I'm really thankful to have this bill here just to simply make the law more easily understood. It makes no change in the law, only in the wording to allow it to come into accord with how the Attorney General has already interpreted it to mean. So thank you. I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councilmember. Questions from the committee? Well, Mr. Councilmember, I'm glad you got dressed up for us. You know, you're being outshone here. Mr. Turner is looking really dapper over here. So yeah, you got to watch out.
I always got to look my part.
Yeah, I hear you, man. It's good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Care.
All right, awesome. All right, see no questions from the committee. Thank you. That'll conclude the testimony from the proponents of the bill. I think we have one member, someone signed up in opposition, and that is Mr. Parrish.
Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. This is my first time actually testifying in the Senate. It's always been in the House, and that's where I was a little while ago. My name's Charles Parrish. I'm a part owner, operator, been doing non-consensual towing in Baltimore City for over 3 decades, 30+ years. I'm also the legislative chairman for the Towing Recovery Professionals of Maryland. The state association that also in 2012 was on a task force. I had submitted a package. Hopefully I did it right. So I hope everybody got it. I'm confused with the testimony here today. We had already spoken in the House. They're saying the tow board would still be in control of the pricing. It's always been in charge of the pricing. In my packet, you will notice that not until when Councilman Dorsey, who I'm a fan of actually. I just think he's a little bit wrong here. He was the first member of a board that ever allowed anybody to charge more than what was established by Councilman Curran, who for decades also worked on the tow board. I'm a strong proponent of the tow board throughout the state. I have. To me, in their own legislative priorities, which I submitted to you, it says this clarification into the code will dramatically decrease the costs associated. Councilman Dorsey has attempted at the tow board. It was rejected. He then took it to the city council. The former mayor vetoed it. And then in this last year, it went to committee and never came out of the committee. I'm asking for an unfavorable review. If the tow board is here representing and they're saying they're going to control it, total fee is a state law to which the task force made statewide. It was originally for Baltimore City because of the fee structure that the city charges. When they gave the fees earlier, when your car is towed, immediately the lowest it's ever going to cost you without the fines would be $230. And you can't get your car 24/7 like the private towers have to provide. So we're doing a lot for the consumer protection. And that clause of total fees was designed because Baltimore City added in fees on top of the towing. The maximum fee right now is $350, which was set, and it's based on the $130 doubled and the $90 that is automatically charged as well. So the total fee to me, this is an end around attempt after 3 attempts to try to decrease what we do. And I'm sorry I went over.
No, that's excellent. Question. Senator Carter has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Parrish. Always nice to have an industry person weigh in. I'm confused though, and so I want to make sure that I'm clear. So under the current law, without this bill, the maximum total fee is $350. Is that correct?
The tow board set that fee at $350.
And does that include towing plus the storage and the other stuff?
That's for the first 48 hours, the maximum any tower in Baltimore City should be charging is $350.
So it's really a starting point.
No, it's the end point. Actually, the management companies, to which like HABC and others, they tell us what to charge. They tell us what to tow. But the city tells us the maximum that any property manager could ever tell us to charge.
So what is your objection? Well, so it's $350. That's the starting point. You say it's the end point, but that doesn't include the storage and all of that. It just the towing fee. The fee for the tow.
It's an impound fee. We don't have a towing fee. We have an impound fee.
Okay. And so what's your concern? Because it seems like that's a reasonable amount of money. Especially, I just talked about the income level of many residents of Baltimore. Help me out.
Because it's the intent of what's been attempted with this language by changing it, which would only affect Baltimore City, not any other part of the state. But yet it's a state law that he's trying to change. It's affecting what we're going to do in the city, and it does restrict the tow board because when you do this, the tow board then will only be allowed to charge whatever the tow fee is for a municipality. We're based upon the municipality towers, which only work 55 to 60 hours for consumer rights to redeem their vehicle. That's why it was put in at 2 times. Never though in Baltimore City up until the two towers in 2018, which I pointed out, were ever charged 2 times. Our rate in Baltimore City is the same as Anne Arundel County and Harford County. The fee, the maximum, like I said, that's the maximum by our license we're allowed to charge. Property managers decide. I'm afraid with this language, what'll come next is what he's been attempting to do, which is also rob the private property owners of their rights to have vehicles removed.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
It's good. Thank you very much. All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, with that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 599. We're actually going to move a little bit out of order. Are folks here for Senate Bill 742? It's my bill. Are we all here? Not everyone? You have a second there? Let's see if we can call that up and then. Yeah, so that 742, everyone's. We'll get you guys next. Yes, Madam Chair. Senator Smith here to on behalf of Senate Bill 742. So we've actually seen this bill or this idea before the committee before, but since we have so many new, half the committee's new, I'm glad that we're presenting it here again. So generally, to protect small businesses and Maryland consumers, the law regulates the way that incentives, performance standards, and other benefits that manufacturers pass along on to the dealers. But under the current rules, there's little transparency and no guarantee of fairness in the way that the manufacturers make cars available to the dealers. And this has a negative impact on both the car dealers and the consumers. As a result, car dealers can't be sure that the most in-demand vehicles like the EVs and certain new lines that they'll have access to those high demand vehicles because the dealers will provide them to more perceived lucrative markets. And so for consumers, this means that you've got to struggle to find certain cars at dealers that are located close by. And they often won't benefit to the kind of robust price competition that if those vehicles were available nearby and more markets and more dealerships that you would have. So this bill, the bill before you, it's fairly short, it's only 2 pages. It's about fairness and transparency and making sure that manufacturers distribute their vehicles to dealers in a way that they can show is reasonable and that gives each dealer a fair chance to purchase in-demand vehicles from their suppliers. So there's essentially 2 components. First, the bill requires manufacturers to allocate their vehicles under a standard that is reasonable and fair for all dealers. And this standard will protect the ability for dealers to have a fair opportunity to buy cars from the manufacturers. And then 2, it puts the burden of proof on the manufacturers to establish that their system for car allocations is fair. Now, this reasonable and fair standard, which I can see someone like Senator Sidnor would pick up on, is it actually mirrors some of the language that regulates other benefits that manufacturers provide through dealers. And this can be found in section 15-207 of the transportation article. Here's an example that the market area used to assess performance standards for dealers be fair, reasonable, and equitable. Another example is that any rebate, cash incentive, or promotion that is based on the sale of an individual vehicle must be reasonable considering all of the existing circumstances. So with that, this is a good consumer protection bill, an equity bill, fairness bill in the marketplace. And so with that, I'd ask the committee for a favorable report, and I'll stand here for questions and then bring up the rest of the panel. Seeing that it's a cold bench, I'll bring up the panel. All right. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, cool. Members of the committee, Alex Shaw with Compass Government Relations. Thank you for having us today. Here today to testify in favor of Senate Bill 742. So Senate Bill 742 is a pretty straightforward bill. It simply says that a manufacturer has to have a fair and reasonable process for allocating vehicles to dealers across the state of Maryland. It is not a prescriptive bill. So it doesn't say, hey, dealer in Howard County should get X amount of vehicles from the manufacturer, and dealer in Talbot County should get X amount of vehicles from the manufacturer. It just says that the process needs to be fair and reasonable. You'll hear from independent dealers, consumer advocates, dealers associations today, all in favor of this legislation. And you'll hear that, one, it will make sure that it's a fair process for dealers to get their vehicles. And then also that, moreover, it will allow for consumers to have better access to vehicles closer to home. So with that, I would urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 742. Thank you. You want to go now?
Thank you. My name is Franz Schneiderman. I work with a group called Consumer Auto Maryland. We work for safety and fairness and transparency for Maryland drivers and consumers. And we strongly support this bill because really it's about fairness and transparency in the way cars are allocated by the manufacturers to the dealers, but thus also to of course, the consumers that they serve. As we've talked about in the past, there are all kinds of benefits, rebates, incentives, other things that manufacturers distribute through their dealers to consumers, and consumers rely on dealers to get, they ultimately come from the manufacturers. And for many of those things like rebates and incentives, there's clear language that requires them to be reasonable and fair and transparent, and to ensure equity of access both for the dealers and, more importantly, from my perspective, for consumers. With respect to the way cars are supplied to the dealers, we don't have the same kind of rules. So under current rules, there's no guarantee of fairness or transparency in the way that works. Dealers can't be sure that they're going to have a fair opportunity to purchase. They do purchase them from the manufacturers, the cars that are in demand and their consumers want. And consumers can't be confident that the dealers in their area necessarily will have the in-demand cars that they're looking for. And, they tend to be, people in the industry tell me they tend to be concentrated in certain kind of dealerships, certain parts of the state, which means that other consumers, don't have very good access to vehicles. You might have to travel a long way to get a car that you're looking for, and there might be very little price competition in your part of the state for those kind of vehicles, which tends to push up the price you're going to pay. So, we're just applying the same kind of standard to car supplies that we already have in 15207 for a whole bunch of other benefits. Pennsylvania has had nearly the same language in its code for 20 plus years. Virginia and some other states have laws on equitable access. So, we think it's a fairly straightforward and clear bill. I'm asking for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyderman. Mr. Kitzmiller? Is that, not next?
Oh,
You can come
I
up.
can go next.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you for having me. My name is Rob Smith. I'm with Fitzgerald Auto Mall. We're actually an employee-owned company, and I'm grateful for the chance to be here. This is truly a very simple bill. Like it says, it's trying to be transparent in how cars are allocated. It's a black box right now. We really don't know. And I liken it to, yesterday I was sharing with some folks, imagine if they shipped all the IPAs to one county in the state and all the Miller Lite to another. How difficult would that be for the consumer if they were in the wrong place and wanted to have that other beer? That's what we're trying to do, is try to make sure that there's fairness. I think that, as Franz Schneiderman shared, we have this law already in the books in Utah, New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania. So it's time for Maryland to try to play a little bit of catch up. And I sincerely appreciate you hearing my testimony. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Senator Muse, you have a question?
Anytime you get around to it. I'm just trying to understand the difference between, in your industry, motorcycles and automobiles, because they want to be amended out of this bill. So what's the difference in terms of, or is there a difference, or is there a way it's normally done?
As a car dealer, I'm not sure what the difference is.
Yeah,
because
Motorcycle Industry Council they oppose it. Not that, I just want to know is there a difference that we should know about that would benefit them or not? And if you don't know it, that's fine. I'll write and ask them.
Might ask the trade association when they come up.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Senator West,
Thank you, Madam
and then
Chair.
Senator Sidnor.
So I guess this is for the sponsor of the bill. The last section, which proposes to change
The burden shifting.
the burden of proof. I'm generally not in favor of trying to change burdens of proof unless there's some mandatory reason why it has to happen. Because in the standard rule is the plaintiff always has the burden of proof. So in this case, you want to shift the burden of proof. Is this some mandatory provision that you think there's some reason this just has to be in this statute?
I'm actually, for the other states that have it, Pennsylvania, Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania's had it for more than 20 years. Is that the case? The burden shift is, so all the other places where this exists, this is the framework that it's put in place with.
I got it, but this is Maryland. We don't
I
have to
got
do
that.
what other states have done. I just think it's generally a bad idea to pepper the Maryland code with shifts of burdens of proof unless there's some mandatory important reason why we're doing it. I'm not sure just because Pennsylvania does it is an important reason why we should.
Well, I mean, in this case, obviously, one entity has a little bit more leverage than the other, and it's not the dealer. And so, that seems to me to be a fair mark there.
Can I add? If you look at the previous section of the code, 15207.
Yeah.
On all these things like rebates and incentives and the way performance standards for the dealers are arranged, in all those cases, the burden of proof is on the manufacturer to establish that they're doing it in a fair and reasonable way. So it's really the same standard of proof that we have in 15207 for a whole bunch of these other benefits.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Which include what, cash rebates and stuff.
Senator Sidnor.
Thank you very much. This actually is a question for, I think, anyone who can answer from the industry, because I don't understand this industry, and one would think that I guess a manufacturer would want their product placed with whomever it is that's going to move the product. So I'm trying to understand, I guess when you first enter the relationship with the manufacturer, isn't this type of stuff already dealt with in your contract? I mean, it's in terms of how many vehicles may be delivered or how that is supposed to work?
It's a great question. So, the contract
Would
is
you mind going to the podium?
Sorry about that. The contract is really a personal services agreement. It predates the FTC, as a matter of fact. So there's been a lot of law around consumer protection that governs both the dealerships and the manufacturers' relationships. You would think on the surface, it makes total sense. We should be able to order whatever we think the market needs. Sadly, even I wasn't able to order all the cars that my customers wanted. Last year, of course, it's an anomaly, I guess, with the chips. But even prior to that, I had such high demand for pickup trucks in one of my markets. I could only get 50% of what they even expected me to sell and held me accountable for. And so you missed your target. Well, I could only get 50% of what you sold, I tried to order. I couldn't order enough to meet the demand that my consumers had.
And why is that happening? I mean,
That's the mystery to solve. That's why we have this.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions for this panel, is Peter Kitzmiller here and Michael Johansson?
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Peter Kitzmiller. I'm the president of the Maryland Automobile Dealers Association. We represent 300 franchise new car and truck dealers and their 22,000 employees across the state of Maryland, here today in support of House Bill 742. I think the sponsor did a good job of explaining the fair and reasonable standard, which is throughout the franchise law that governs the relationship between dealers and manufacturers. I won't go into that. The only thing I would say is this. I mean, most of you, if you've either tried to buy a car or you've watched the news in the last 2 years, we've had an historical shortage of new cars for the last 2 years. And as one of the previous witnesses said, hopefully that's an anomaly. It's getting a little bit better. It's still very, very difficult. So how these limited number of vehicles is allocated is critical. the dealers in Maryland and to our customers. And the last point I want to make is as we move forward and a lot of this session has been dealing with our transition in Maryland from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. And so Maryland has set very strict sales mandates on the manufacturers and the dealers going forward for EVs. And so in order for us to get as close to those as we can, we need to make sure these vehicles are allocated as fairly as possible. And again, I think this is simply stating that the allocation process will be fair and reasonable, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, is Michael Johansson here? Any more testimony for favorable? Okay, then we'll move to the unfavorable. We have Paul Taberzi.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Paul Taberzi. I'm an attorney from Baltimore. I represent General Motors. It's an honor to be before this committee. Congratulations, Senator Kelly. Great to be here. Great sponsor, bad bill, respectfully, Mr. Chairman. We do oppose the bill, and Mr. Smith works with a nice gentleman named Jack Fitzgerald. And when you talk about leverage, Mr. Fitzgerald's a very sophisticated dealer, well represented. So there's equal leverage, and we enter into franchise agreements, contracts, which deal with these matters. There's no evidence that I know of any problems in this. And ask yourself, should you really insert yourself between two well-represented, well-lawyered up, sophisticated parties and sort of mediate? We say there's no reason to do it. With that, I would like to look at page 2, the burden of proof language, with respect, Mr. Chairman. Senator Carter, you're an expert on criminal law matters. This committee deals with that. That language would be like saying that every criminal defendant is guilty until proven innocent. We are guilty until we prove innocent. There's no reason to do that. There are a couple of other sections in the code, but they were part of negotiated settlements on all sorts of provisions in franchise law. But just because it may appear in a couple of other sections in this area, I wouldn't put it here. I'm not aware of anything else in civil jurisprudence where you say to the defendant, you have the burden of proving what you're doing is reasonable and right. It's kind of crazy. If they want to go into court or go to the MVA and arbitrate, they ought to have the burden of proving, what's wrong or what's right. So we don't see any need for the bill entirely, respectfully, Mr. Chairman, but certainly page 2, the burden of proof is not something that you should pass if you pass the other parts of the bill. Again, it's an honor to be here. Happy to be here and answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much. Always an honor to be here. Senator James, great to see you. Thank you, Senator. Great to be here. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Good to see you again. We haven't seen too much of you, Mr. Taberzi, recently.
I love this committee. I want to come back. Senator Sidney.
Senator Sidor.
Very much. I'd like to pose the same question to you that I asked earlier. I mean, what's going on? To me, it would seem that you want your product moved and that you're going to do whatever it is to get your product to the dealers. But from what they're saying, it sounds like the dealers are not getting enough of the product to move it.
I'll be honest, Senator Sidnor, I haven't heard of any problems whatsoever. I talked to my clients at GM. I haven't heard of any problems. People want a Cadillac, they get a Cadillac. They want a Buick, they get a Buick. So I don't know what the problem is. There are provisions in the franchise agreements with which determine who gets what and all that. But if you have a problem, you can talk to General Motors or any of the manufacturers. We haven't seen any evidence or heard of any problem.
So within the agreements, do these agreements usually note the amount of vehicles and the types of vehicles that are likely to come in over the course of the contract?
I believe their formula, their procedures set forth where fairly people can get the cars. But I don't know. I haven't heard of any problems out there. If I want to go buy a Cadillac, I can get a Cadillac, So I don't know of any evidence of a problem. But again, to me, the first section is sort of bland. It says fair and reasonable. The third section, the burden of proof, as a lawyer, I do find very offensive, and I don't see any reason at all to put the burden on us to justify something. I would respectfully say take that out if you see any merit to the other provisions.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, I came in late. I don't want you to repeat, but I assume that there are market forces. Dealers know sort of the community they serve, how many cars they can move of a certain type. And that and other factors drive how much they're at least going to have physically present. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
And then I assume, because I live in Hartford County and we don't have a lot of dealers and we don't have a big selection, especially if I'm dealing with BMW or something like that, which is what I buy. So, but what happens is I go to the BMW dealer, I talk them through what I'm interested in, and they pretty promptly make sure that I have one or two or three vehicles to look at or I could drive, which I often do, but they will bring them to me. Is that your understanding of what happens?
Yes, and there's no problem. And I'm just a lawyer, I'm not an expert, but in your case, suppose dealer A doesn't have it, they can often call one of their colleagues and they can trade and this kind of thing, but I haven't seen any problems. So I agree, there's no problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That sounds pretty good. But anyhow, I regress. Will this? Whoops, you're still in the room. Will this in any way affect the manufacturer dealer floor plan, or how, like, the first 30 days that a dealer has cars, they're being paid for to have them sit out there, and then the next 15 days, if they haven't sold, they have to then pay to have that type of a car on it. So that's where my concern is. If they're not getting the cars, but yet being forced to put a car that won't sell, how does this affect that at all?
Honestly, don't know. I'll find out for you. And also, I think Mr. Fisher, the gentleman behind me, may be more of an expert. I don't know, but I'll get you that information.
That same question was actually posed to some people that were supporters there. They said it did not. I'm just trying to get from the manufacturer's side.
I will get from GM and I'll get back to you, but Mr. Fisher might actually know that, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Joshua Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Josh Fisher. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We are a trade association representing the vehicle manufacturers with franchise dealers in the state. We also represent EV battery producers, automated vehicle developers, and other automotive suppliers. I'll just give a me too to what Mr. Taberzi said, but I do want to highlight a couple other things, right? So automakers and dealers rely on each other for success. The idea that a manufacturer would unreasonably allocate vehicles to a dealers to us doesn't really make sense, right? The whole purpose of the industry is for our members to produce the vehicles, deliver them to the dealers, for the dealers to sell to consumers. The idea that our members would operate in some irrational manner in that regard, we don't really agree with that. But as Mr. Taberzi said, the real issue here is the presumption provision. And yes, it might appear in other parts of the code. But what are we really talking about? This is a privately negotiated contract. And each time a bill like this is enacted, the manufacturer is losing a negotiated contractual right. Again, going back to the idea that we're going to do this in some unreasonable manner does not make sense. And I just want to highlight the fact that we opposed this bill last year, it failed, and we agreed with that decision, and they're back again this year. But they didn't come to us in the interim with any specific concrete concern about what they're trying to address. And I didn't really hear that in the panel's testimony either. Mr. Smith mentioned one time he had trouble getting a truck, but if there's a specific issue, we're happy to sit down with the dealers and address that. But they haven't come to us. We're here all the time. Well, I'm local. We have local representation. They know how to find us. We're not hiding from these conversations, and we would encourage them to do that in the future. But until they do that, we're forced to show up today and oppose this bill. They've got a separate one in the House that has some different language. The Dealers Association has a completely separate bill in the House. So I think, we're in a challenging position because they're making lots of claims about what they're trying to do, but we're really not sure what they're really after here. And so we're forced to request an unfavorable report. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Seeing no questions, that concludes the hearing on Senator Sidnor, sorry. You're over there in that corner, yeah. Go ahead, Senator Sidnor.
Just a quick question. Do you all, I'm assuming, keep records of where you're distributing your vehicles, right?
Yeah, I assume that's, common practice for manufacturers to track where they're sending their vehicles. Yes.
I mean, and I don't know if you know this, but would your information show whether or not certain areas of the state are getting more vehicles than others?
Well, the traditional allocation system in the industry is kind of commonly or colloquially known as turn and earn. So if a manufacturer or dealer sells a vehicle, they're going to be in line to get that next vehicle, right? Manufacturers have to make a lot of predictions in terms of consumer interest in a specific model. Different models sell differently in different markets across the country, right? So there's a lot of work going into figuring out how they allocate vehicles and how they're going to sell. And, a lot of that has to start with the production of the vehicle. Manufacturers can't just produce an unlimited quantity of vehicles. That would be incredibly inefficient, would drive up costs. And you also, I think we're right about the 3-year mark where our members shut down all their North American production for 2 months due to COVID. And we've been down millions of vehicles produced since then. So it's been a challenging time, and the proponents alluded to that. And, again, it's a blip in the longer term picture here. So, barring some, specific concern here, don't really know what they're really trying to address because, different markets are going to have different demands, and manufacturers are doing their best to allocate vehicles as efficiently as possible, right? I think, again, my point was we're operating under the reasonable standard here that we're trying to do our best to get vehicles to where they're needed. But again, there's not an unlimited supply of every make and model out there to do that, right?
Thank you.
From the committee. Seeing no questions, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 742. Next up, we have Senator Reedy with Senate Bill 564.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and now Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Wonderful to see you all. And it's nice to be back in the Judicial Proceedings Committee again. And I know for some of you, this is going to make perhaps a new issue for you as we have new folks on the committee, but this is a bill, Senate Bill 564, that we've dealt with a few times in the last couple of years. We've had this discussion, and I believe that this committee has been, I think, of a similar mind to try to do something on this issue. I think it's been attached to a couple bills before, didn't pass as a standalone, but Senate Bill 564 would classify the theft of a handgun as a felony offense. The first conviction would impose an additional 5-year imprisonment with a minimum of 2 years and or $1,000 fine. Second conviction would impose an additional 10-year imprisonment with a minimum of 5 and up to a $2,500 and or up to a $2,500 fine. What's the purpose of this bill? Why are we talking about felonies? Under current law, Maryland classifies any firearm with a barrel length of 16 inches or shorter as a handgun. Theft of a firearm in general is subject to the general theft statute, which most of you in the committee know, but just to reiterate, it imposes penalties based on the value of the property, of the stolen property. So a first offender, handgun, person who steals a handgun, if it was say a $600 handgun, which you can buy a lot of different kinds of handguns for around that price range. Some are more expensive, some are less, but that's a good a fair way to estimate a handgun purchase. You'd receive just a misdemeanor charge, and all that is, it's a maximum of 6 months in jail, which rarely happens, any kind of sentencing, and or a $500 fine, and then a second or subsequent conviction of stealing a similar piece of property at that price, at that amount, would be only a possible 1-year imprisonment, and again, $500 fine. So Senate Bill 564 recognizes that when someone were to steal a handgun, they are stealing something that can cause significant damage to a neighborhood, to a community. We all are wrestling with the issue of violence in our communities, a rising tide of violence. And while handgun thefts are certainly not the only way that these illegal guns get in our community, they are a significant source of gun violence and gun crime. And so this bill imposes penalties that are far more fitting for that. According to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, 56% of firearm traces in 2020 were pistols and handguns. Over 1,100 of the traced firearms in 2020 that were part of this were in possession of individuals 21 years of age or younger. While not every firearm traced by ATF was used previously in a violent crime, these traces are requested by law enforcement agencies for the purpose of investigating sale, transfers, and possessions of specific firearms involved generally in illegality or in crime. The use of a handgun to commit violent crimes in Maryland, as we know, is very common. In fact, I remember a couple of years ago, and I don't know the statistic for last year, but a couple of years ago, they looked at the city of Baltimore alone, and there was, I believe it was in the neighborhood of 350 murders, and it was about 335 of them. It was a handgun. So handguns are tremendous, are used tremendously. They're the weapon of choice. They're the firearm of choice for criminal activity and illegal handguns, illegally obtained handguns in one way or the other. So if someone's going to steal them, we want to be sure that we send a serious message. We want to get illegal guns off the street, and we want to reduce the violent crimes that these illegal guns that are obtained through theft or other means are used to commit. So I'd respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 564. I don't know if I have any other witnesses present. I want to thank, I know the Randallstown NAACP sent a supportive letter. We have bipartisan co-sponsors on this bill, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator Reedy. I have a question. You can answer it, or maybe there are some other people who are going to test favorably later. Maybe if you can't, I don't know if you know the numbers. So my first question is if you have any idea, and if you said it, I'm sorry, I was moving. Basically, I'm curious. I read recently some federal data that said that Maryland was among the states that had the longest period of time between when an initially legally purchased gun was located in some type of illegal activity or confiscated illegal with a person that was unauthorized to have the gun.
The longest period of time in between.
So that period of time, believe it or not, is an average of 10 years. And that's kind of an astounding thing. I'm wondering if you have any idea how much this is prosecuted now under the current theft and the 5 years.
That's a great question. And I used to know that it was prosecuted, but again, it was prosecuted when they would have somebody who was tried for theft. But again, as you know, how the theft, you know better than I do, maybe as far as from the line of work that you're involved in with being an attorney, that theft statutes, it's quite often pled down. And so I don't have an answer to that question, though. I don't know.
I was just curious because I don't know, and I really don't know. I don't know how often an actual theft of a gun is prosecuted. I know that ultimately when the gun is found in the hands of someone that's not authorized to have it, it'll just be like, illegal gun or whatever, but it's not, I haven't seen theft prosecuted very often. So I
can tell you in my community, if someone has a firearm stolen, it is taken very seriously. But again, I know that for example, in my county, they've prosecuted for theft of a handgun or theft of a firearm. But again, quite often you're limited by the monetary amount to going, I believe if someone goes into somebody's house or somebody's property and steals a handgun, there's no accidental. It's actually why I focus on handguns in this bill. I mean, there's no like, oh, I loaned him my rifle, he never gave me back for hunting. This is like you've gone and made a purposeful choice to steal something that could be used. Usually you're planning to use it in an inappropriate way. So I just, that's why I have the bill to try to focus on that issue. And hopefully it would make it maybe a little bit more cut and dry for prosecution. But maybe someone else can answer that question more specifically.
Thank you. I'm going to move on and let Senator Fulton talk, but I am, if anyone later can answer this, the curiosity that I have is how often it's prosecuted, how often it happens when it's reported someone's actually accused of the theft. And then, I would think that this would be somewhat common in families, like, where someone's children aren't supposed to get access to the gun, but may take the gun, rather than necessarily it always occurring in a burglary. You broke into the house and stole the gun. I don't know. So thank you for that. And Senator Fulton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the way especially when you bring in the family component into it. But I can say that through the law, I think what he's trying to clarify, if I understand this correctly, is that there are handguns that don't fall by value in the felonious amount. They are able to be sold at $500, $600, $700, $800. And because of that, because of their value, which does not allow them to be listed as a felony theft, that's why, because it's set in statute by value only. So codifying this to where if someone purposely were to take the handgun, then would, by that act in and of itself, regardless of value, would be the component that I think we're trying to accomplish here. Would you agree,
That's
Senator?
correct. And I do recognize with firearms, and I think I may have mentioned it in our in both of our counties, you know, there's a lot of families that own firearms.
Yeah.
It's part of their part of our sort of our more of a heritage and culture. And they take their guns getting stolen seriously. It could be true that a family might have some dispute over a firearm,
Mhm.
but generally speaking, that would be adjudicated probably not without involving the police.
Well, we'd like to think so, but yeah, I agree. And I just thank you for bringing the bill forward.
It might involve lawyers, but not the police.
Yeah, I mean, always looking at intent. Intent is a important
Correct.
element to any crime.
And you have to prove that as well.
Thank
Yeah.
Much. Seeing no other questions, Senator James.
Thank you for bringing this this bill forward. I really do get the sort of mismatch of how serious it is that a gun gets stolen to the fact that it might not be prosecuted if it's of such low value economically, but not in terms of harm. But what I don't know, and I don't know if you know, when you brought the bill forward, is whether we have any data that would suggest that making this a more serious crime would reduce gun violence. I don't know how many stolen guns are used to commit violent crime. I know there illegal guns are. I just don't know about, lawfully obtained and later stolen guns are in crime, and whether we've shown in any place else that this bill has happened that it would help to reduce violent crime. So I am troubled that because of how harmful a gun can be in the wrong hands, that we don't have a way to maybe prosecute it more seriously. But I also don't know if it would advance, and I'm assuming one of the things you're concerned about is advancing the reduction in violent crime, particularly with handguns.
I definitely think cracking down on repeat violent offenders and making sure they spend real time in jail is probably one of the best things we can do from an enforcement standpoint. And we know there are other issues that in the system we need to work on as well. To me, this is like a piece of it. And I'm not even coming here claiming it's the majority of it. I mean, clearly, I think a lot of times illegal guns are obtained a variety of ways that are not somebody going and stealing it.
Right.
I do think it does happen sometimes. We do know that there was a case recently in the news about it. It was a stolen handgun that was used. From my perspective, by having it just simply be a misdemeanor with 6 months maximum in jail, we know how this works in the system. You're not getting any jail time for that. So I would like, my view is this would carry with it the ability to really hold jail time as somebody's over this. And I think we've seen that when you have sentences that are swift and fair, that it can act as a deterrent, and it can keep people from it might make somebody think twice, but also frankly, we just need people who do this should be put in jail. In my opinion, should be put in jail. I mean, even if it only even if it protects a few people, I think it would be helpful, because again, it's about proof. You have to obviously prove mens rea. You have to prove a purposeful stealing of this handgun. But I think, and I'm also most interested in if somebody's doing this repeatedly too. So I don't have data on exactly how many specific violent crimes are linked to a stolen handgun. There are some for sure.
But all I'm saying is, for someone like me who sort of sees what you're trying to get at, with this disconnect between the value of the gun and the seriousness of when it's stolen, or the potential serious, now that it would really help. You may not get it this year, but you may not have this, but finding out how effective this might be.
Let's take a look at what else.
Really helpful. And then if you think it's part of 2 or 3 other things that collectively would help us with violent crime, maybe not now, but maybe elaborating on that with people like me who'd want to know more about that.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely can work on. I believe it's 15 states that treat it as if when you steal a handgun as a felony, but I will get back to you on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? So Senator Reedy, I may have another one. Senator Folden actually sparked this question in me because you talked about the value. And so I thought of when an automobile is stolen, and certainly Senator Folden knows about this, how always both are charged. The high value and then also the unauthorized use. Usually they don't have the theft. Usually they only have the unauthorized use, kind of similar to probably a gun. They catch the person that isn't supposed to have the car. They rarely catch the person stealing the car, but they charge them anyway with the theft. But my question is, because I lean toward feeling this is a better idea, to keep it where it is now, unless there is proof that the value is of such a level that it ought to be a felony. That's what I'm thinking would be a better practice, because I kind of lean toward not
That's current law. That's current law.
without numbers,
Yeah.
knowing how much, how often this even, I don't know, but I feel like rarely is theft charged, prosecuted, convicted. I think it's more likely that it's later on 8, 9, 10 years down the road that someone's caught unauthorized to have a gun and it's an illegal gun. So that's what I think probably
That's fair
happens.
enough. I would just say, keep in mind that this General Assembly has put laws in place that severely penalize people who don't properly store their firearms. So it seems a little strange to me that we wouldn't be pretty hard on somebody who actually would go and steal a handgun in particular. So that's all. I definitely can get back to the senator on those data points she asked for. But yeah, I guess I understand your point though. Yes. Thank you.
Just kind of thank you, Madam Chair. Just kind of piggyback on what you're saying. I mean, another component that we could talk about or discuss would be if it was in the commission of, say, like a first or second degree burglary, that way it would carve out the one part that you're talking about with having an issue with the family. But that's a broader, that's another discussion. But I just was thinking about that when we're trying to piecemeal this apart. I think it's a good bill. I think it's got a good reason behind it. I've been a part of investigations where we've recovered guns very quickly. I mean, in the age we live in with like ring systems and all that, we're seeing a lot more activity with people being recorded, actually going into people's homes and removing property. So the evidentiary portion of it is there to prosecute. We're in different times. So I think that it's important to understand that holistically, we don't want to put these products, these guns out on the street in the hands of illegal activity. And there should be some teeth to it, regardless of value, because of their inherent danger associated with them. So isn't that true?
I guess that's so. I agree.
Thank you. Any more questions for the sponsor? If not, I'm going to move on to the favorable testimony. We have John Jocelyn. And the others are virtual, so you're up, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. John Jocelyn speaking for 2A Maryland. The theft of a handgun is a precursor to future unfortunate events. Once a firearm is stolen, it will never, ever be used again legitimately. We passed legislation recently to ban the manufacture of so-called home-built firearms. A frame alone, no component parts, not yet functional, you're subject to 5 years and up to $10,000. But if you steal a fully functional firearm, ready to go the moment you take possession of it, you're only charged with a property crime. What this does is it makes the theft of a firearm a more attractive proposition. Your return on investment is much better because the penalty you might pay is much less. I've been able to get some data from law enforcement agencies. It's difficult to get it from them, but Anne Arundel County alone reports that approximately 300 firearms are stolen per year in their jurisdiction. Not all of these are recovered. The senator spoke about the time to crime, from time of theft to time it's recovered. It may go for years, be used in multiple crimes, but never is recovered by law enforcement. So the time to crime can vary, and there's so many factors in that, it's difficult to ascertain what one reads into that. In my written testimony, there is data from the Maryland Firearm Crime Injuries, Fatalities, and Crime Firearm Study, which I believe was commissioned as a result of Chairman Clippinger's legislation several years ago. And I've included that in my testimony. What's distressing is that no pros cases for violent crime, 6,212 in a 1 year period. Total that were null prost for various firearms crimes were over 14,000. So many of these crimes are going unpunished. We respectfully request that you take a stand. Let's change the landscape. Let's make the theft of a crime of firearm the crime that it really is and the threat to society that it presents by passing this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jocelyn. I think we're going to switch to virtual now. So let's take questions for the sponsor or Mr. Jocelyn, if there are any questions. All right, seeing no questions, we'll switch to virtual. Mr. Amsbaugh. We can see and hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Brent Amsbaugh. I'm testifying from Carroll County. I keep ending up testifying after Mr. Jocelyn, who hits the nail on the head a lot of the times. My biggest point that I was going to convey was that if I, as a Navy vet, lifelong law-abiding citizen, were to privately make a firearm, I would, and get caught with it, I get thrown in jail for 5 years. But the person who steals it might not even get prosecuted for it. That, it doesn't seem fair to me or many people like me. And a lot of the bills this session from the General Assembly seem to vilify those of us who are following the rules and want to own firearms legally, and you seem to be doing nothing to really make it harder for the criminals who are out there stealing and murdering everybody. It honestly feels like your focus is on the law-abiding citizens and not on those who are out there committing the crimes. I urge a favorable report on this bill. Let's make it a felony like it is in Pennsylvania and other surrounding jurisdictions. I know for a fact it is up there. My brother's a cop up there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next is Carla Mooney, also virtual.
General Assembly seem to do.
Thanks, Ms. Mooney. You are ready to go. If you can just unmute yourself and we'll be good to go. Ms. Mooney, we can see you. If you could unmute yourself, you're showing as being muted here. If you have the YouTube feed open, that might be causing some feedback for you on your end. So close the YouTube tab and then unmute yourself, please, and we'll be good to go. We got you, go.
Hi, my name is Carla Mooney. I'm here to testify for Senator Reedy's bill. I appreciate him bringing this bill up to us once again and giving us opportunity to discuss this. There are often criminals who steal the firearms, who have small fines, immediate release, go out and steal again. There's no consequence for crimes committed. I think about this and I think about when I was a kid and how my grandmother would get mad at me for doing something wrong. She would tell me to go get my own switch and don't you dare make it a wimpy one. That was a consequence as a child and made me realize if I did something wrong, it was going to hurt. Corporal punishment is in its own right punishment. So we do something wrong so minor that someone who's taken a firearm from a law-abiding citizen who, if they misstep, they get 5 years in jail. We are letting someone who's stole something that could end up being a weapon used as deadly force in what could have been a simple crime of snatching a purse. Let's not treat it like property worth $1,500 or less. Let's treat it as what it is, a firearm theft that could injure someone or kill someone. Consider this bill as an increase to our law-abiding citizens' safety, as it will remove criminals from the street who knowingly possess them and use them to commit the violent crimes. I ask that you find a favorable report on SB 564.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mooney. Next, we'll go to Ms. Novotny. Ms. Novotny, good to see you virtually.
Good to see you. Good to see you as well, Chair. Chairs, members of the committee. My name is Katie Novotny. I'm the Vice President of Maryland Shall Issue. You have our written testimony before you. So thank you, Senator Reedy, for yet again bringing this bill. You touched on what the current law is, so I won't belabor that point. But most firearms, most handguns are well under that $1,500 value. Most fall between about 500 and maybe 900. So they fall under that $1,500 value. So in reality, most people convicted of this crime do not see any jail time. The Maryland sentencing guidelines classify this property crime as the least serious offense, and it generally only receives probation. Conviction of this, most importantly, conviction of this offense also does not make a person a disqualified person under state or federal law. State or federal law requires either a felony or a sentence of greater than 2 years. So this short sentence for theft does not meet that requirement. So you can have someone having stolen a handgun and still be able to legally purchase firearms. And I think that's something that we would like to avoid. So the extremely light punishment for stealing a handgun is in stark contrast to strict penalties imposed on those who may inadvertently run afoul of any number of Maryland's firearms laws. Our written testimony has details on some of these, and these are all things that we've often discussed in this committee. So we request a favorable report. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Novotny. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Did we get everyone? All right, with that, sure. Senator James would like to ask a question. Yes.
Someone is convicted under this law. What would that do to their ability to get a permit for a gun? Does it have any impact on that?
It's a good question. I actually thank Ms. Novotny for bringing it up in her testimony.
I heard her say something, but
it would make you a disqualified person because it'd be a felony now. So and I should have included that when I was talking to my testimony. I skipped right over that. That's really important. So if somebody right now, if you steal a handgun, it's just a misdemeanor. So you're not unless it's over $1,500. So you're not a prohibited person. So this actually would mean, so it's a pretty, if someone who if someone's, it's a pretty serious issue because it would make you a prohibited person and would put you in line for a number of penalties.
If you would agree with me, let me see if you do. We are, trying to make our permitting as strict as we can to make sure the people that acquire guns are so well trained, and also try to identify ahead of time those that should not get a permit or should be disqualified from getting a permit. So if this bill passes, that would help our state police and our permitting scheme in the state of Maryland to identify someone who probably should not be getting a lawful permit in the state of Maryland. Is that correct?
Correct. And you and I may not agree completely on how strict our permitting should be, but we do agree someone who would steal a firearm or steal a handgun should not be getting.
Right, we agree on that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. With that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 564. All right. Interesting debate, just given the new realities of Bruin as more, potentially more firearms are going to be entering into society. Okay. With that, we'll have Senator Waldstreicher with Senate Bill 685.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. All over the country right now, entrepreneurs and innovators are developing the autonomous vehicles of the future. As you probably know, these autonomous vehicles, also known as self-driving vehicles, are capable of traveling without human input. One company on the cutting edge of this technology is RRAI, located right here in Maryland, in fact, in Montgomery County. RRAI has delivered autonomous mobility and robotic solutions for more than 2 decades. In fact, They were the first DoD-approved company to deploy unmanned vehicles. Here in Maryland, technology companies like RRAI buy vehicles, integrate their autonomous technology, and then sell these vehicles to their commercial, industrial, and government customers. Now, companies like Maryland's RRAI are a little different from Tesla or GM or Ford. Those companies manufacture our autonomous vehicles, but vendors like the US military often don't want to lock themselves into particular manufacturers. They want to be manufacturer neutral and instead add autonomous capabilities to existing trusted vehicles. And that's exactly what companies like RRAI do. They buy off-the-shelf vehicles, make those vehicles autonomous, and then sell those vehicles to the military, to ports, and other government agencies. So here's the problem. Potentially, this means that they are technically auto dealers, which of course they are not. Specifically, Maryland law stipulates that selling 3 or more vehicles in a calendar year requires a vehicle dealer's license. Senate Bill 685 would codify the definition of autonomous vehicle converter and exempt these technology companies from our vehicle dealer statute. Notably, this bill is narrowly tailored to eliminate the possibility of unintended consequences. Regular passenger vehicles are not covered, and the vehicles sold must exceed weight and capability thresholds established under federal law. Senate Bill 685 is simple legislation that provides innovative Maryland companies like RRAI the ability to scale up and grow. These companies never intended to be auto dealers, and this bill simply clarifies that. I respectfully request a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Ashley Bagwell, here this afternoon on behalf of RRAI in strong support of Senate Bill 685. Thank you to the Vice Chairman for introducing this bill and for his excellent explanation of the bill. Here with me this afternoon is Mr. Don Lefebvre, Vice President of Corporate Affairs for RRAI. And before I turn it over to him, I just want to make a couple of quick comments. First, I want to be clear about what the bill does and what the bill doesn't do. This bill does not authorize autonomous vehicle converters like RRAI to integrate their autonomous technology. They can already do that, and they do that heavily governed by a lot of federal laws and regulations. As the Vice Chairman said, this bill simply clarifies that they are not a dealer and therefore are not subject to a lot of the requirements that dealers are subject to, like sign requirements, parking lot requirements, service center requirements, and the like. In essence, it simply affirms this particular business model. As was said as well, this bill is narrowly drafted, and if you look at MDOT's letter of information, they note that it is limited to very specific circumstances. Before I close, I'll just point to the screen before y'all. That's a photo of the kind of vehicles that we're talking about to give you an idea. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lefebvre, and I'm happy to help answer any questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Don Lefebvre, Vice President of Corporate Affairs for RRAI. RRAI is a Clarksburg, Maryland-based company with over 300 employees, 200 of which live here and work in Maryland. We're here in strong support of this bill. And we have been a proud partner to the Department of Defense for 21 years, as Vice Chairman Waldstreicher had mentioned. We as we are expanding our commercial business, we feel that this legislation is crucial in that effort. I'd like to thank the Vice Chairman for his support and leadership on this issue, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Just here to answer questions today, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you to the panel. Questions from the committee? The last bill of the day, so you got off easy, but all right. I appreciate it. Thank you all very much. With that, that'll conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 685 and our hearings for the day.